If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow.
My name is Michael Reeves. I'm the Chief Ranger at Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico. I've been working underground for almost 7 years now, and I thought I knew these caves better than anyone. I was wrong. It was a Friday evening, in late October, when everything changed. I was leading the last tour of the day through the main chamber, what we call the big room. About 30 tourists followed me as I pointed my flashlight at the massive limestone formations hanging from the ceiling. These stalactites have been growing for over 500,000 years, I told the group as they gazed up in wonder. Each one forms drop by drop, one tiny layer of mineral at a time. The floodlights we installed throughout the cavern made the white and amber formations glow like they were alive. Some of the delicate ones looked like frozen waterfalls, while the thinner ones, what we call soda straws, hung from the ceiling like icicles in a giant's freezer. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on my sleeve. "Do the rocks grow while we watch?" she asked. I smiled and knelt down to her level. "They're growing right now, but so slowly that it would take your whole life to see one grow the width of a piece of paper." Her eyes went wide, and I could see her trying to imagine something that slow. After finishing the tour and answering the usual questions about bats and darkness, I walked the group back to the elevators. As the last visitors filed in, one older man lingered. "Something feels different down here today," he said quietly. "The air pressure or something." I nodded politely. "The barometric pressure does change before storms. There's one coming tomorrow?" He shook his head. "No, it's something else, like the cave is breathing differently." Then he stepped into the elevator before I could respond. Once everyone was gone, I started my end-of-day checks. Most rangers would head up and go home, but I had readings to take in the lower chambers, an area we'd just discovered last month that wasn't open to the public yet. I liked the quiet after the tourists left. Just me and the cave. I walked through the silent pathways, my boots echoing on the stone. The Park Service had installed metal walkways in most areas to protect the cave floor, but where I was heading, there were only narrow dirt paths marked with survey flags. About an hour into the lower chambers, I stopped to check the pressure gauges we'd installed. The readings were normal, but something felt off. That old man's words came back to me. The cave, breathing differently. That's when I first heard it. A scratching sound coming from the wall to my right. At first, I thought it might be settling rock. These caves are always changing, even if too slowly for us to notice. But this was different. The scratching had a rhythm to it, almost like something was counting. I pressed my ear against the cool limestone. The sound stopped immediately. "Just my imagination," I said out loud, my voice bouncing back at me from the darkness. Then my ears popped painfully. The pressure was dropping fast. That wasn't normal, especially this far underground where the environment stays stable. I swallowed hard to relieve the pressure, and that's when I heard it, whispers echoing through the narrow passage ahead. I couldn't make out words, just the hushed sound of voices. But there shouldn't be anyone else down here. I double-checked my radio to call up to the station, but all I got was static mixed with fragments of tours. It sounded like recordings of tours I'd given weeks earlier, phrases I recognized coming through the static. "Hello? Anyone copy?" I tried again, but the radio just spat back pieces of old conversations. I decided to continue deeper to finish my readings when I noticed something strange on my boots. Limestone dust. I looked up. A fine shower of white powder was falling from certain areas of the ceiling, but when I shined my light on it, I couldn't see any cracks or movement. The dust just kept falling like slow-motion snow. I'd been in these caves long enough to know when something wasn't right. I decided to head back, but when I turned around, I found my path blocked. There must have been a small collapse while I was checking the gauges. Nothing major, just enough rocks fallen across the passage to prevent me from going back the way I came. No problem. There were maintenance tunnels that connected to the main chambers. They weren't mapped on the tourist guides, but I knew them well enough. Or I thought I did. I took the left fork in the path and entered a narrow passage the maintenance crews used. The ceiling got lower, forcing me to hunch over. The air felt thicker here, harder to breathe, and the smell was wrong. Caves, usually, have a clean, earthy smell, what we call cave petrichor. But this smell was sharp, like ammonia or old bones. After about 20 minutes of careful walking, I realized I was in an area called the Whispers Gallery. The old-timers who worked here in the 1940s had named it that. They claimed if you stood in certain spots, you could hear voices that sounded like family members calling your name. I'd always laughed off those stories as echoes, or the wind moving through tight passages. But standing there alone, with my headlamp casting long shadows on the damp walls, I wasn't laughing anymore, because now I could hear someone calling my name too, Michael. It was faint but clear, and it sounded exactly like my ex-wife Elaine's. Her voice. "Hello?" I called out, but only my own echo answered. I quickened my pace. The sooner I got back to the main chamber, the better, but the knot in my stomach told me that something in Carlsbad caverns had changed, and not in a way that could be explained by any geology book I'd ever read. The sound of my name faded away, but the feeling of being watched didn't. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my head clear. This wasn't the first time I'd felt uneasy in a tight space. Before working at Carlsbad, I led search and rescue teams in cities. We would go into collapsed buildings after earthquakes or explosions to find survivors. 3 years ago, that job nearly killed me. I was searching through a fallen apartment building when the floor gave way beneath me. I dropped 2 stories and ended up trapped under concrete and steel beams. For 3 days, I lay in the dark, in a space barely bigger than a coffin. By the time they pulled me out, I could hardly breathe from the dust and fear. The doctors fixed my broken leg, but they couldn't fix the fear that stayed with me. Some nights I still wake up feeling like walls are closing in on me. That's why I took this job at Carlsbad, to face my fear every day until it went away. Exposure therapy, my therapist called it. I rubbed my bad leg as I moved through the passage. It always ached when I got nervous. The limp slowed me down, but my size helped. I've always been small and compact, good for tight spaces. Years working. Underground had made my skin so pale that the other rangers joked I was turning into a cave creature myself. I thought of Elaine. We'd met during ranger training, fell in love while mapping new passages together, and got married right here in Nigelles, the main chamber of the cavern. But the job that brought us together tore us apart. After my accident, I became obsessed with the caves, spending more and more time underground. 6 months ago, she asked for a divorce and transferred to Yellowstone. "Focus, Michael," I muttered. To myself, checking my headlamp. This custom light was my most prized possession, triple the battery life of standard issue. Down here, your light is your lifeline. I never go anywhere without backup batteries too. My hand went to my pocket, feeling the small piece of concrete I always carried, a chunk from the collapse that nearly killed me. Some might think it strange to keep a reminder of your worst day, but to me it meant I had survived. I knew these caves better than most people know their own homes. I had memorized over 80 miles of surveyed passages and personally mapped 15 more. If there was a way out, I would find it. But I'd never seen the passages behave like this before. The map in my head wasn't matching what I was seeing. Tunnels that should connect were dead ends. Familiar landmarks seemed moved or changed. Last week, something strange happened that I hadn't told anyone about. I found my own boot prints in a chamber we hadn't explored yet. The clay floor had been untouched for thousands of years, but there were my prints, clear as day. I told myself it was just another ranger with the same size boots. But deep down, I knew they were mine. These thoughts raced through my mind as I navigated the dark tunnels. Every time something weird happened in the caves, like now, I would explain it away. The whispers were just air moving through cracks. The pressure changes were from the weather above. The echoes playing tricks were just sound bouncing off. Limestone walls in strange ways. But somewhere deep in my mind, a voice was asking, what if there's more to these caves than we understand? I stopped at a fork in the passage. Neither way looked familiar, which was impossible. I'd been through here dozens of times. I closed my eyes and pictured the map. Left, I said confidently. Left takes us to the supply closet near the main chamber. The passage narrowed as I continued. The ceiling dropped lower until I had to crouch. The stone felt different here too, rougher, almost warm to the touch, and wet, like it was sweating. My breathing quickened. The walls seemed to be getting closer with each step. I could feel the old panic rising, the one from being buried alive. Not now, I whispered, forcing myself to take slow breaths. You're fine. The cave is the same as it's always been. But it wasn't. Something had changed, and part of me, the part that competed to be first to discover new passages, that pushed past safety protocols to map unknown areas, that part of me was both terrified and excited. If there was something new in Carlsbad caverns, I wanted to be the first to find it. Even if that something made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, I switched on my backup light to push back more of the darkness. The beam caught something ahead, a widening in the tunnel. I moved forward carefully until the space opened, into a small room I'd never seen before. And there, on the far wall, was something that made me freeze in place. Handprints. Dozens of them pressed into solid limestone, as if the rock had been soft clay when they were made. But these weren't normal hands. The fingers were too long, stretched out like they had been pulled, and the joints, they bent backward, all of them, in a way human hands can't bend. I approached slowly, my light fixed on the prints. I reached out my own normal hand, hovering over one of the strange impressions. It was larger than my spread fingers by at least 2 inches. "This isn't possible," I said out loud. My voice echoed back to me before I even finished speaking. But the echo was wrong. It didn't just repeat my words, it completed them differently. "This isn't safe," came the reply in my own voice. I jerked back from the wall, my heart pounding. That wasn't how echoes worked. Not in any cave I'd ever been in. Something was very wrong in Carlsbad caverns, and I was alone, deep underground, with whatever was causing it. I backed away from the wall of handprints, my light never leaving them. I needed to document this. I reached for my mapping equipment in my pack and felt my stomach drop. The aluminum case was crushed flat, like it had been squeezed between 2 massive rocks. But that was impossible. It had been safely in my backpack the whole time. I pulled out the mangled case. My compass was shattered, and the mapping tools were bent beyond use. Even the metal measuring tape was compressed into a twisted coil. No natural cave pressure could do this. That's when I noticed the smell, human sweat, fear, not mine. I hadn't been sweating that much. This smell was old, lingering in a place where no human should have been before. I was supposed to be the first person to fully explore this section, yet something about the air said otherwise. I dug deeper in my pack and found a small metal box I'd discovered last week, but hadn't opened yet. It looked like an old camera case from the 1950s, based on the faded Park Service logo. I'd meant to turn it into the historical department, but with everything going on, I'd forgotten it was in my pack. My hands shook slightly as I popped open the rusty latch. Inside was an old helmet camera, the kind they used to strap to mining helmets for cave documentation decades ago. The film was still inside. I carefully removed the film canister and held it up to my light. Something had been Important enough for someone to photograph down here. I slipped it into my pocket. If I got out, I'd have it developed. As I stood up, my headlamp suddenly dimmed when I faced a certain section of wall. I turned away, and it brightened again. I swung back. Dim, away, bright. Something about that particular rock formation was affecting my light. I approached carefully. It was a different kind of stone, shale, not limestone, like most of the cave. I reached out to touch it, and my backup light dimmed too. Both lights shouldn't fail at the same time. They were on separate battery systems. A drop of water hit my cheek and then another. The steady dripping from above formed a puddle at my feet. I'd heard water drops in caves my whole career, but this sounded different. The drops hit with a rhythm that wasn't random. It was almost like words, slow, drawn out. Syllables in a language I couldn't understand. I shook my head. Just water, I told myself. Your mind is playing tricks. I turned to find another way out and spotted something on the ground that made me stop short. A perfect circle of dead bats, maybe 30 of them, lay mummified on the cave floor. Their leathery wings were spread out, creating a ring about 6 feet across. I knelt down and gently picked one up. It was completely hollow. Not just dead, but emptied out, like everything inside had been removed. There were no signs of decay or animal bites, just empty skin and bones, preserved in the cool, dry air of the cave. I set the bat down exactly as I'd found it and backed away from the circle. In all my years of caving, I'd never seen anything like this. Bats died, of course, but not in perfect circles, and not hollowed out like this. Something caught my eye as I turned, a flash of movement in the tunnel ahead, but when I looked directly at it, nothing was there. I kept my light steady and used my peripheral vision. The passage seemed to stretch and contract when I wasn't looking right at it, like it was breathing. "Focus, Michael," I whispered. "Find your way back to the main chamber." I chose a tunnel that seemed to lead upward, usually a good sign when you're trying to get back to tourist areas. The path was marked with survey flags, the bright orange, standing out against the stone. I followed them carefully. After 20 minutes of walking, I stopped. Something was wrong. I was passing the same rock formations I'd seen before. I checked one of the survey flags and felt a chill run through me. They were mine. These were flags I'd placed last month when mapping this section. But they weren't supposed to be in a circle. They were supposed to lead from the lower chambers back to the main route. I took out a piece of chalk and marked the wall with a large X. At least I could tell if I passed the same spot again. 5 minutes later, I found myself staring at my own X. "This isn't possible," I said, my voice echoing in the empty passage. But it wasn't just my echo this time. There was a second voice, almost perfectly matching mine, coming from somewhere ahead. And it wasn't repeating what I said. "Everything is possible here," it said. I froze. That wasn't an echo. Someone or something was answering me. I forced myself to keep moving. I took a different turn at the next junction, ignoring the survey flags. Maybe they'd been moved. Maybe I was more turned around than I thought. The new passage narrowed. Quickly, I had to turn sideways to squeeze through in some spots. My bad leg scraped against the rough stone, sending pain shooting up to my hip. But I kept going. The walls here were different, darker, with veins of some metallic mineral running through them. My lights reflected off these veins, creating disorienting patterns of brightness. It was like walking through a hall of broken mirrors. The passage opened into another small chamber. I stopped at the entrance, my light sweeping across the space. There, on the far wall, was another X, my X, in my chalk. But I hadn't been in this room before. I approached slowly, examining the mark. It was definitely mine. The same thick lines I always used. But how had it gotten here? I turned around, shining my light on the walls, the floor, the ceiling. That's when I noticed something even stranger than the mark. Fresh chalk lines covered parts of the ceiling, mapping notations in my handwriting, but I couldn't have written them. The ceiling was 20 feet high in this section, well out of My reach, even if I'd been trying, my hands started to shake again. Something was very wrong with space in this cave. It was like the rooms were copying themselves or moving when I wasn't looking. Or maybe I wasn't the only one doing the looking. I turned slowly, sweeping my light across the chamber again. The beam caught something that made my blood turn cold. A helmet, a modern Park Service helmet like mine, was wedged into a crack in the wall. I pulled it free and turned it over. The name tag on the back read M. Reeves. It was my backup helmet. The one I kept in my office above ground. I dropped it like it was on fire. This wasn't just strange anymore. This was impossible. Nothing made sense. Either I was losing my mind, or something in this cave was changing the rules of reality itself. And then I saw them, for the first time. In the wall directly across from me, half emerged from the solid stone as if walking through thick mud, was a human-shaped figure, or almost human. Its body was the exact color and texture of the surrounding rock, but its proportions were all wrong. Too thin, too tall. And its face, where eyes should have been, there was just a horizontal cut, like a single slash across the upper part of its head. I blinked hard, sure I was seeing things. When I opened my eyes, the figure had retreated into the wall, leaving only a slight bulge in the stone to show it had been there at all. I wasn't alone in Carlsbad caverns, and whatever was down here with me wasn't human. I couldn't move. My feet felt frozen to the cave floor as I stared at the spot where the figure had been. Had I really seen it? A person, or something person-shaped, walking through solid rock? I took a step back, keeping my eyes fixed on the wall. That was when I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but again, there was nothing there when I looked directly at it. I tried an experiment. I stared straight ahead and paid attention to what I could see at the edges of my vision. There, movement on both sides, stone-colored figures sliding along the walls, retreating whenever I tried to look right at them. "I can see you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What are you?" No answer came, but I felt the air grow colder. My breath fogged in front of my face. I decided to keep moving while watching the walls from the corner of my eye. They were following me. 4 figures. They stayed partly in the stone, only half emerged, their bodies the exact same color and texture as the cave walls. If you weren't looking for them, you might think they were just strange rock formations. But they moved, and they were getting closer. I noticed something else. They were copying me. If I raised my hand, one of them would raise its hand a few seconds later. When I limped on my bad leg, one started dragging its leg too. They were learning how I moved. A low rumble filled the passage, making me feel sick to my stomach. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, and it messed with my sense of direction. I couldn't tell which way was up or down for a few seconds. When the feeling passed, I realized the figures had used the distraction to get closer. They were only about 10 feet away now, still half in the walls. Their eyeless faces were turned toward me. I pulled out my rock hammer, the tool I used for collecting samples. I swung it at the nearest figure, but it passed right through, hitting the wall behind with a clang. The creature didn't react at all. My hammer couldn't touch it, but somehow I knew it could touch me. I backed away and took a different passage, moving as fast as my bad leg would allow. The figures slid through the walls beside me, keeping pace easily. They never fully left the stone. It was like they were swimming through it, creating ripples in the solid rock as they moved. The cave grew colder the longer they followed me. My headlamp began to dim again, and I felt the backup batteries in my pocket growing cold. Whatever these things were, they drained energy from everything around them. "What do you want?" I shouted, stopping to face them. One of the figures moved forward, its body sliding halfway out of the wall. Its head tilted, that horizontal slash where its eyes should be widening slightly. It raised a long, thin arm and pointed deeper into the cave. They wanted me to go further down. "No," I said firmly. "I'm going back up." I turned to continue the way I thought led to the main chambers. But when my light hit the passage ahead, I found only solid wall where the tunnel had been moments before. Somehow they had sealed it off. I turned back to find another way, but each path I tried ended the same way. A wall of solid stone where a passage should have been. They were herding me, forcing me deeper into the cave. With no other option, I followed the passage they left open. It sloped downward at a steep angle. I had to brace myself against the walls to keep from sliding. The air grew even colder, and my lights dimmed until I could barely see a few feet ahead. The creatures stayed with me, sliding through the stone on either side. Sometimes they would vanish completely, only to reappear further ahead. They seemed to be playing with me, like cats with a mouse. I tried to stay calm, to think logically. These things, whatever they were, seemed to have control over the cave itself. They could move through stone, change passages, maybe even affect time and space down here, but they wanted something from me. If they just wanted me dead, they could have done that already. The passage opened into an enormous chamber, bigger than any I'd mapped before. My weak light couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling. The floor dropped away sharply about 20 feet ahead, forming what looked like a giant pit. The creatures gathered at the edge, their stone bodies now almost fully out of the walls. Up close, I could see how unnaturally thin they were, like they had been squeezed or compressed. Their faces were smooth, except for that single horizontal line where eyes should be. One of them made a sound, a scraping noise like stone against stone. The others answered with similar sounds. They were talking to each other. I took a step back, planning to run, when I heard something that froze me in place. Among their stone-scraping voices was another sound, words in English spoken in a voice I recognized as my own. "Come see," my voice said from one of their mouths. "Come see the hive." They had been listening to me, recording my voice, learning my language. The one in front reached toward me with its long, thin fingers. I stumbled backward, but hit the wall. There was nowhere to run. Its cold stone hand touched my face. The chill went straight through my skin, into my bones. Images flooded my mind. Tunnels, chambers, a vast network spreading under the earth far beyond anything we had mapped. And something else. A huge open space filled with thousands of the stone creatures, all connected to the walls, floor, and ceiling, as if they were growing from the rock itself, the hive. I pushed the creature's hand away, breaking the vision. My heart was racing and sweat froze on my face, despite the effort of running. I needed to find a way out, and fast. That's when I noticed something. A small stream running across the far side of the chamber. The creatures stayed well away from it. I remembered an old caving superstition. Certain spirits couldn't cross running water. I made a break for it, sprinting toward the stream, despite my bad legs screaming in pain. The creatures moved to intercept me, sliding through the floor to emerge in my path, but they were careful not to get near the water. I splashed across the shallow stream, nearly falling on the slippery rocks. On the other side, I turned to find the creatures lined up at the water's edge. They wouldn't cross. "You can't follow me here, can you?" I said, my voice echoing in the vast chamber. They shifted and swayed, those eyeless faces all turned toward me. One reached a long arm over the water, but pulled back quickly when droplets splashed onto its stone skin. Where the water touched, its body sizzled and released a puff of steam. I had found their weakness. Now, I just needed to find a way out. Followed the stream, keeping the water between me and the creatures. They paced along the other bank, occasionally testing the water but never crossing. The stream led to a narrow crack in the wall, tight, but just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Before entering, I turned back for one last look at the creatures. They had gathered in a semicircle, their bodies half merged with the floor. And walls. All those horizontal slashes were fixed on me. Then, as one, they sank into the stone and vanished. But I knew they weren't gone. They were just taking another route. trying to get ahead of me, and deep in my gut, I knew where they were going, to cut off every path that led up to the surface. I squeezed into the crack, following the trickle of water that had become my only protection. The only question now was whether I would find my way out before they found me. The crack in the wall led to another tunnel, this one barely wide enough for me to walk upright. The small stream flowed along the floor, sometimes just a trickle between rocks. I followed it carefully, knowing it was my only protection against the stone creatures. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I had been in these caves for years and never seen anything like those creatures. Had they always been here, hiding in the walls, or had our new excavations somehow awakened them? My mouth was dry and my stomach empty. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and it felt like I'd been down here for days. My watch had stopped working hours ago, so I had no idea what time it was or how long I'd been trapped. After what seemed like miles of walking, the tunnel widened into a small chamber with several passages leading off in different directions. The stream split too, with thin ribbons of water flowing into 3 of the passages. I had to choose which one to follow. That's when I smelled it. Natural gas. The sulfur odor was unmistakable. One of the passages must lead to a pocket of gas, trapped in the cave system. Under normal circumstances, I would avoid that area completely. Cave gas could kill you if you breathed too much of it. But now, it gave me an idea. A desperate one. I still had my lighter, the emergency fire starter, from my pack. If those creatures were controlling the cave, reshaping passages to trap me, maybe I could reshape things myself. Fire and gas would create an explosion. It might collapse some tunnels, but it could also open new ones. It was incredibly dangerous. I could easily kill myself. But staying down here with those things wasn't an option either. I chose the passage with the strongest gas smell, but made sure it also had a stream running through it. The water would keep the creatures away while I set up my plan. As I moved deeper, the gas smell grew stronger, making my eyes water. I had to be careful not to breathe too deeply. I needed to find the main pocket, set up the explosion, and then get far enough away to survive it. My headlamp was barely working now, giving off just enough light to see a few feet ahead. The cold seemed to be following me, even though I'd left the creatures behind. Or had I? Sometimes I thought I saw movement in the walls, like something watching me through the solid stone. I hadn't drunk any water in hours, and my lips were cracked and bleeding. The cave seemed to be changing around me, or maybe it was my mind starting to go. The walls looked softer somehow, almost like they were breathing. When I touched the stone, my hand sank in slightly before I pulled it back in horror. Just dehydration. I told myself, your brain is playing tricks. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The longer I stayed in this place, the more I could sense what the creatures had shown me. That the rock itself wasn't as solid as we think. That there were spaces between spaces, worlds pressed against our world like pages in a book. Finally, I found what I was looking for, a small chamber filled with the smell of gas. My lighter wouldn't work here. There was too much gas in the air. One spark would blow us all to kingdom come. I needed to set up a delayed reaction. I took out my emergency flare. If I could position it right, I could light it from a safe distance, give myself time to take cover, and let it ignite the gas. As I was setting up, I noticed drawings on the wall that my weak light had missed at first. Cave paintings, crude figures drawn in red ochre, showing humans running from tall, thin beings that seemed to come out of the walls. The paintings looked ancient, maybe thousands of years old. Next to them were newer markings, dates and names. Other explorers who had found this place. The most recent date was from 1952, alongside initials that matched the old helmet camera I'd found. This had all happened before. People had encountered these creatures, tried to escape, maybe tried to warn others. But no one had believed them. or their warnings had been lost or ignored. I set the flare carefully at the entrance to the gas chamber and unspooled the striker cord as far as it would go. This would give me about 30 seconds to get away after. Lighting it. Just as I was about to pull the cord, the temperature plummeted. My breath clouded in front of my face, and the walls began to ripple like water. They had found me. Stone hands reached through the walls, floor, and ceiling, dozens of them all around me. The creatures were emerging faster now, no longer hiding or playing games. Their eyeless faces loomed from every surface. I yanked the striker cord and ran as fast as my bad leg would allow, splashing through the small stream. I had seconds before the flare would light and ignite the gas. The tunnel shook with that low, rumbling sound the creatures made. Pieces of the ceiling fell around me as I ran. Behind me, the first tongue of flame licked the air as the flare caught. I dove behind a large boulder just as the gas ignited. The explosion was deafening. A wall of heat and pressure slammed into me, throwing me hard against the stone. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, dust filled the air so thickly I could hardly breathe. My ears rang painfully. Blood trickled down my face from a cut on my forehead. The explosion had collapsed part of the tunnel, but it had also blown open a new passage, one that sloped upward. Hope surged through me. Maybe this led to the surface. I struggled to my feet, my whole body aching. My headlamp was completely dead now, but there was a faint glow coming from the new passage. I limped toward it, praying it was daylight. The stone beneath my feet felt different, smoother, almost polished. And the walls had changed too. They seemed to pulse slightly, like they were breathing, or like something massive was breathing. On the other side of them, the glow ahead grew brighter, but it wasn't sunlight. It was a strange blue-white radiance coming from the walls themselves. The passage opened into a vast chamber filled with the light, and there, on the far wall, were cave paintings, unlike any I'd seen before. They showed the stone creatures, but also showed humans, or things that had once been human, half-merged, with the cave walls. And in the center was a scene that made my blood freeze. A man with a bad leg, surrounded by the creatures, his body halfway into the stone. It was me. This moment, painted hundreds or thousands of years ago. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. How could ancient people have painted this moment before it happened? Unless time worked differently down here, unless past, present, and future were somehow the same in this place. The rumbling started again, louder this time. The floor shook beneath my feet. The explosion must have angered them. I needed to find a way out now. I spotted a crack in the ceiling where water dripped down. Maybe it led to the surface. I started climbing, using the uneven wall for handholds. My bad legs screamed in pain, but I kept going. The stone under my hands began to give way, becoming soft like clay. Fingers reached for me from the wall. Dozens of stone hands trying to pull me in. "No!" I shouted, kicking free. "I'm not becoming one of you!" I scrambled higher, following the water dripping from above. The crack widened enough for me to squeeze through. Light, real light, shone from above. Sunlight. With one final effort, I pulled myself up and out, and found myself lying on the floor near the tourist entrance of Carlsbad Caverns. A group of rangers stood over me, looks of shock on their faces. "Reeves," one of them said, "where the hell have you been? We've been searching for 3 days." 3 days? It had felt like hours. They told me later that when I didn't check in. After my rounds, they sent out search parties. They had been looking in all the wrong places because the passages I described didn't exist on any map. I tried to tell them about the creatures, the hive, the way the stone moved. They nodded politely and called the doctor. "Shock," they said. "Dehydration, possible head injury." 2 members of the search team went to check out my story. They never came back. The official report said they must have gotten lost, fallen into an unmapped shaft. The search was called off after a week. I insisted on seeing the doctor when the headache started. The CAT scan showed something the doctors couldn't explain. hollow spaces throughout my bones where there should have been solid material, like something had started to empty me out from the inside. I left the park service after that, but I couldn't leave the mystery behind. I kept tracking strange disappearances in caves across the country. I had the film from the old helmet camera developed. Most of the pictures were too damaged to make out, but one showed a clear image of stone wall with a human face emerging from it, eyes closed as if sleeping. 3 years later, a caving photographer exploring a newly opened section of Carlsbad sent me a picture that made my hand shake so badly I dropped it. It showed a passage that had collapsed shortly after the photo was taken. And there, watching from the wall, was a face, half human, half smooth stone. My face, they're still down there waiting in the stone, the hollow ones. And sometimes I catch myself standing too long in front of rock walls, my fingers pressed against the surface, feeling like I could just push a little harder and slide right through, because part of me never left that cave. And sometimes I think the cave never left me. My name is Victor Thompson. I've been a park ranger at Shenandoah National Park for almost 7 years now. Most people come here for the views from Skyline Drive, especially in autumn when the leaves change. That's actually my favorite time. 2, I studied botany in college, so the park asks me to keep track of when the leaves change each year and how bright the colors get. This autumn is different, though. I felt it the moment I woke up this morning. The mist was thicker than usual, curling through the valleys like something alive. I stood on my cabin porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise. As the light hit the trees, the whole forest seemed to catch fire, not with actual flames, but with the brightest reds, oranges, and yellows I've ever seen. In all my years working here, I've never seen colors this vivid. That's going to bring in the tourists, I thought, snapping a quick picture with my phone to text to my boss. After breakfast, I grabbed my notebook and hiking pack to start my daily rounds. The park was quiet this early, too early for most visitors. Sunlight broke through the colorful leaves above, making spotted patterns on the road, like some kind of nature's kaleidoscope. I parked my truck at one of the lookout points and hiked down into the valley to check on some of my regular monitoring spots. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. Around the base of an old maple tree, fallen leaves had formed a perfect circle, not the random scatter you'd normally see. The leaves were arranged by color too, red ones closest to the trunk, then orange, then yellow, like rings on a target. I frowned, kneeling down to look closer. Maybe some tourist did this for a photo, I said out loud, but something felt wrong. I checked another tree nearby. Same thing. Perfect circles of leaves arranged by color. I wrote it down in my notebook and kept walking, feeling slightly uneasy. The weather was off too. It was mid-October, but the air felt warm, almost like late summer. Normally by now we'd have had at least one cold snap, but the temperature had stayed weirdly warm for weeks. The leaves were changing color right on schedule, but they weren't. Falling like they should be, they hung on the branches bright and thick. My radio crackled, and I pulled it from my belt. "Victor, you copy. Just checking in." It was Jenny from the visitor center. "I copy," I said, but as I talked I heard a strange rustling sound coming through the radio, like someone was crunching leaves right next to the microphone. "Jenny, is someone there with you?" "No, I'm alone." "Why?" "Nothing. Just some weird noise." "On the line, I'll check in later." As I continued my hike, I noticed something else odd. A small group of deer stood at the edge of a particularly colorful grove of trees. They were perfectly still, just staring into the grove, but not entering, despite the good browse in there. As I got closer, they darted away, but still wouldn't go near those trees. The trails were getting harder to follow too. Usually, the maintenance crews clear the paths regularly, but today leaves covered everything so thickly I had to be careful where I stepped. Twice, I nearly twisted my ankle in hidden holes. By noon, I realized I'd wandered into Whisper Ridge, an area with some of the oldest trees in the park. I remembered the stories my grandfather used to tell me about this place. Old colonial tales about trees that walk at harvest time and entire settlements that disappeared overnight. Just silly stories to scare kids, but standing here now, they didn't seem quite so silly. The smell hit me next. Autumn usually smells like decay, a sweet earthy scent of leaves breaking down into soil. But today, the air was heavy with something else, an overpowering sweetness like too ripe fruit fermenting in the sun. It was so strong it made my head spin a little. I checked my watch. I should head back to file my reports, but something made me want to keep exploring. Something wasn't right in my forest, and I needed to figure out what. I wasn't always a park ranger. I used to work at the university, studying how plants react to their environment. I was good at my job too, until the accident at the old cemetery. I was researching how plants grow differently in soil where people are buried. My tests showed something strange. The plants seemed to respond to human remains in ways that science couldn't explain. It was like they were listening somehow. My bosses called my ideas too fantastical and suggested I take some time off. I never went back, but that wasn't the only reason I came to work at Shenandoah. My little brother Danny disappeared in these woods when we were kids. We were playing hide and seek during a family camping trip. I was counting, and Danny was hiding. When I opened my eyes and called out, "Ready or not, here I come," he was just gone. They searched for weeks. They never found him. I shake these thoughts away as I head back toward the ranger station. No use dwelling on old pain. Back at the station, I run into Julia Wesley, the new park photographer. She's sorting through equipment for tomorrow's shoot. "Victor," she calls, waving me over. Her camera bag is stuffed with lenses and filters. "I was hoping to see you. I need advice on the best spots for fall color shots." I run my hand through my hair. Auburn, just like the maple leaves outside. People always comment on the match. "The colors are incredible this year," I tell her. "But there are some strange things happening out there." She looks up, interested. "Strange how?" I hesitate. "Probably nothing. Just some unusual leaf patterns." Well, unusual patterns sound perfect for photos. "Maybe I can come with you tomorrow? Get some shots while you do your research?" I agree, and we plan to meet at sunrise. As Julia leaves, I notice Russet, my red-tailed hawk, perched outside my window. I've trained him to help with wildlife surveys. He tilts his head at me, then looks toward the colorful ridge we just returned from. Something about his posture seems tense. "What's wrong, buddy?" I ask, opening the window. Russet hops inside, but keeps glancing in that direction. When I suggest we fly over that area tomorrow, he ruffles his feathers and turns away. In all our years together, I've never seen him refuse a flight path. That night in my cabin, I clean my grandfather's walking stick, a smooth piece of oak he carved himself decades ago. It's been passed down to me, my most treasured possession. As I wipe it down, I notice a sticky spot, like sap oozing from the wood. But that's impossible. This wood has been dried and sealed for over 40 years. I try to sleep, but dreams keep waking me up. In them, I'm standing in a forest clearing, unable to move. I look down and see roots growing through my legs, anchoring me to the spot. Each time I wake up sweaty and panicked, my heart racing. Morning comes, and I meet Julia at the trailhead. She's excited about the perfect weather for photos. "I've lived in these mountains my whole life," I tell her as we hike up the ridge. "The trails change a little every year, but this autumn feels different. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath," she laughs. "You sound like those scary campfire stories." I force a smile. She's right, I'm being silly. After all, I'm a scientist. I've studied autumn in these mountains for years. The local stories about walking trees and vanishing people are just old tales. Even if things look strange this year, there's got to be a natural explanation. There's probably a fungus or insect causing the unusual patterns, I say, more to convince myself than her. Maybe a new invasive species affecting the leaf chemistry. We reach a viewpoint, and Julia gasps at the valley spread below us. A sea of reds and golds, so bright they almost hurt your eyes. She starts taking photos while I check the trees nearby. That's when I notice my walking stick is leaving that sap-like residue again. I wipe it off, puzzled, and press on. I've walked these trails hundreds of times. Nothing to be afraid of. But as we move deeper into the forest, that strange feeling grows stronger. The air is too still, the leaves too bright, and somewhere deep inside, a voice that sounds like my brother's whispers. They're awake now, Vic, and they're hungry. After lunch, Julia and I head to the old ranger archives. I want to check past records of fall colors to compare with this year's unusual patterns. Help me look through these photo albums, I tell her, pulling out dusty binders from the 1970s and 80s. We spread them across the table, flipping through faded photographs of autumn landscapes. That's when I find something that makes my skin go cold. Julia, look at this, I say, pointing to a photo from 1978. A maple grove with leaves arranged in perfect circles around the trunks, identical to what I saw yesterday. We keep searching and find more photos, 1985, 1992, 2004, 2016, all showing the same exact patterns in different parts of the forest. That's impossible, Julia whispers. Leaves fall differently every year, and the trees replace all their leaves every spring. I nod slowly, unless someone is arranging them this way on purpose. We find an old journal from a park surveyor dated 1937. His neat handwriting turns shaky as he describes certain trees changing position overnight during peak color season. The maple that stood 20 paces from the creek now stands only 5, he wrote. I have measured 3 times to be certain. The forest is rearranging itself when no one is watching. The last entry simply reads, "They move only when you're not looking." I close the journal, trying to stay calm. Let's go back out. I need to check something. As we head deeper into the forest, I notice the silence first. Usually, autumn woods are noisy, leaves rustling, squirrels chattering, birds calling. But in these groves, there's nothing. Like the forest is holding its breath. We reach a section where the colors are most intense. I stop suddenly. Do you smell that? I ask Julia. She sniffs the air. Sweet, like rotting fruit. No, like sweat, fear. The smell reminds me of how my clothes smell after a nightmare. Julia doesn't seem to notice it, but I can't shake the feeling we're being watched. That's when I spot something in a tree trunk, a piece of fabric embedded in the bark. I move closer, feeling sick as I realize what I'm seeing. It's a faded blue cloth, like from a child's jacket, grown over with bark. The fibers are woven into the tree itself, as if the tree grew around it or through it. I touch it with trembling fingers, thinking of Danny's blue jacket. "Victor, look at this," Julia calls from nearby. She's found an old camera, the kind that prints photos right away. It's covered in leaves but looks almost new. Someone must have dropped it recently, she says. Let's see if there are any pictures left, I suggest. We open the film compartment. 3 photos remain. Julia presses the button and the camera whirs, spitting out a dark square that slowly reveals itself. It shows this exact spot in the forest, but the trees are all wrong, like they've moved. And in the background, barely visible among the branches, is what looks like a human face formed from leaves and twigs. It's just a weird shadow, Julia says, but I can tell she doesn't believe it. The next photo is even stranger, just a blur of bright colors, as if someone photographed pure light. When the 3rd photo develops, Julia gasps and drops it. I pick it up and feel my heart stop. It shows a small boy in a blue jacket standing among the trees. His face is blurry, but I'd recognize that jacket anywhere. It's Danny's. And according to the timestamp at the bottom, The photo was taken yesterday. This can't be real, I whisper. Danny disappeared 20 years ago. Julia looks scared now. Victor, I think we should go back. I nod. But as we turn around, I realize I don't recognize the trail anymore. The path we came on seems to have vanished, replaced by thick brush. We came from that direction, Julia points. No, it was that way, I say, pointing in the opposite direction. We pick a path and walk for 20 minutes, but somehow end up back at the same clearing with the embedded fabric in the tree. This is impossible, Julia says, her voice rising. We've been walking in a straight line. I check my compass. The needle spins wildly, never settling on north. The wind picks up, whistling through the branches. But it doesn't sound like normal wind. It sounds almost like words, like someone whispering just below the level I can understand. Then we find the dead fox. It's lying perfectly preserved in a pile of leaves. Its body dried out like it's been dead for months. But there's no decay. Most disturbing of all, bright red and orange leaves are growing from its eye sockets, unfurling like tiny flags. As the sun starts to set, I pull out my binoculars to try to spot a landmark. Looking at the distant ridge, I see what appear to be people standing among the trees, tall, thin figures perfectly still. But when I lower the binoculars to look with my naked eyes, there's no one there. Julia, I say quietly, we need to find water, a stream or river. Why? Just trust me, and whatever happens, don't run. As darkness begins to fall, we try a different path. After 10 minutes of walking, we somehow arrive back at the same clearing again. The forest has rearranged itself around us. We're trapped. Night falls faster than it should. The sun seems to drop below the horizon in minutes, not hours. Julia and I huddle close, using our flashlights to keep the darkness at bay. We need to stay awake, I tell her, no matter what. In the dim light, the forest looks different. The trees seem to bend toward us. The moon casts strange shadows that move even when there's no wind. Victor, Julia whispers, pointing to a gap between two oak trees. That's when I see it for the first time. A human shape standing perfectly still about 30 feet away. But it's not human, not really. It's made entirely of autumn leaves, red maple leaves forming the chest, yellow birch for arms, orange oak for the head. Where eyes should be, there are just hollow spaces dripping something that looks like honey. Don't move, I breathe. Don't. Take your eyes off it. As long as we stare at it, the leaf figure remains frozen. It's so perfectly formed, fingers, legs, even what looks like hair made from thin, curling leaves. Julia's flashlight flickers, going out for just a second. When the light returns, the figure has moved 10 feet closer without making a sound. They only move when we're not looking, I say, remembering the surveyor's journal. We back away slowly, keeping our eyes on the leaf person. Then we hear it, a dry, papery rustling behind us. We spin around to find another leaf figure just feet away, arm outstretched toward Julia's hair. She screams and drops her flashlight. In the beam of my light, I can now see dozens of them surrounding the clearing, all slightly different colors, but all with those same hollow eyes, leaking sweet amber fluid. "Run!" I shout, grabbing Julia's hand. We crash through the underbrush, my flashlight bouncing wildly. Behind us, that rustling sound grows louder, like thousands of dry leaves being crushed all at once. I notice something strange as we run. Wherever. My flashlight beam hits the ground. Bright, colorful leaves seem to rise up, releasing a fine dust when stepped on. The dust makes my head spin, and twice I nearly turn the wrong way. They're herding us, I realize. Don't step on the bright leaves. We reach a fallen log and pause to catch our breath. In the silence, I hear something even more terrifying. The rustling has changed, becoming rhythmic, almost like words. They're talking to each other, Julia whispers. I nod, too scared to speak. When we start moving again, I notice the temperature has dropped dramatically. My breath comes out in white puffs, and my fingers are going numb. Julia stumbles, suddenly sleepy. We have to keep moving, I say. shaking her. The cold is part of it. They want us to fall asleep. As we push forward, I spot something that makes my blood freeze. In a small clearing ahead, fallen leaves have been arranged to form a simple picture, a stick figure being pulled into a tree trunk. "Victor," Julia's voice cracks, "look up. Above us. The leaf people are moving through the trees themselves, sinking into one trunk and emerging from another further ahead. They're cutting off all escape routes. I pull out my emergency flare and strike it. The red light illuminates dozens of leaf figures now, surrounding us completely. The closest ones back away from the flame, their bodies making cracking sounds like burning paper. "They don't like fire," I say. Using the flare as a weapon, I clear a path, and we run toward where I think the old park road should be. The leaf people scatter but don't go far. When my flare finally dies, they begin closing in again. This time they move differently, more angry, more determined. One gets close enough that I see its face clearly in my flashlight beam. The leaves are arranged to form a crude human face, and with horror I realize it looks familiar. "Danny?" I whisper. The leaf Danny tilts its head, amber fluid dripping faster from its eye hollows. It reaches toward me with a hand made of red maple leaves. My brother's favorite tree. Julia pulls me back. "Victor, that's not your brother." The leaf Danny makes a sound like wind through dry leaves, but I swear it's trying to say my name. More leaf people emerge from the darkness, each one moving with purpose now. They herd us toward a grove of ancient trees, where the leaves are the most vibrant I've ever seen. Without warning, my flashlight dies. In the pitch darkness, the rustling sound surrounds us completely. I feel dry, papery fingers brush my neck, my arms, my face. The touch leaves my skin burning and numb at the same time. When Julia manages to light a match, the leaf people have moved impossibly close. A tight circle around us. One reaches out and touches her camera. Where its fingers meet the plastic, the camera begins to change, turning the same bright color as autumn leaves. "What do they want?" Julia cries. As if in answer, the leaf people all point to the center of the grove, where the oldest and largest tree stands. At its base is a perfect circle of red, orange, and yellow leaves, and in that moment I understand. They want us to join them. The leaf Danny steps forward again, holding out its hand. In the glow of Julia's match, I see something impossible. The leaves that form its face shift and move, reshaping into a smile I haven't seen in 20 years. "Run," I tell Julia, never taking my eyes off the leaf figures. "When the match goes out, run straight behind you. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." But we both know that's a lie. When Julia's match burns out, darkness swallows us. I hear her footsteps crashing through the underbrush behind us. The leaf people rustle loudly, excited or angry, I can't tell which. I stumble backward, following Julia's sounds. My skin burns where the leaf figures touched me. Looking down at my arm in the faint moonlight, I see patches of skin turning yellow and red, like autumn leaves. "Julia," I call out, "head downhill, find water." I remember from my years of research that trees don't grow well in standing water. If these things are part tree, maybe water will stop them. The rustling grows louder, coming from all directions. My foot catches on a root and I fall hard, rolling down a slope. When I stand, dizzy and scraped, I realize I'm alone in a small clearing. No sign of the leaf people, no sign of Julia, my ranger. Training kicks in. Stay calm, find water, get to high ground to spot landmarks. I pull out my compass again, still spinning wildly. With no other option, I listen carefully and hear the faint sound of running water to my left. I head that way, moving as quietly as I can. The brook is small, but fast-moving. I wade into the middle, the cold water shocking my system awake. From here, I can see the old fire tower on the ridge. A metal structure used to spot forest fires, abandoned years ago but still standing. That's when I see Julia, stumbling along the brook about 50 yards upstream. "Julia!" I call as loudly as I dare. She turns, relief flooding her face when she sees me. She wades toward me but stops suddenly, looking past me with horror. "Victor, your neck!" I touch my neck and feel rough patches where my skin has changed texture. It feels like tree bark. "We have to keep moving," I say. "The fire tower, if we can reach it, they might not be able to climb the metal." We splash through the brook, staying in the water as long as possible. When we have to leave it, we run uphill toward the tower's silhouette. Behind us, the leaf people emerge from the trees. Dozens of them now, moving faster than before, no longer. Pretending to be human, they flow across the ground like a wave of color. "Almost there," I gasp as the tower comes into view. The old metal structure rises 40 feet above the forest floor. The bottom ladder rung is 10 feet up. They removed the lower section years ago to keep kids from climbing it. "I'll boost you up," I tell Julia. "Once you're on the ladder, pull me up." She nods, eyes wide with fear. The leaf people are closing in, that papery rustling growing louder. As Julia climbs onto my shoulders to reach the ladder, I see more leafy patches spreading across my arms. "Victor," she says, looking down at me from the first rung, "your eyes, what about them?" "They're changing color, like the leaves." I don't have time to think about what that means. The leaf people reach the edge of the clearing, pausing at the border like they're gathering strength. Julia extends her hand. "Jump!" I jump as high as I can, grabbing her hand. For a terrible moment, I think she won't be able to hold my weight. Then she braces herself and pulls. I scramble up the ladder just as the first leaf figures reach the tower base. They bunch together, reaching up with leafy arms that fall short by inches. We climb higher, the metal rungs cold under our hands. At the top platform, we collapse, breathing hard. "We made it," Julia whispers, "but our victory is short-lived." Below us, the leaf people begin dropping their leaves, thousands upon thousands of them, piling around the tower base. The pile grows. Quickly, already 3 feet high and climbing. They're going to bury the tower in leaves, I realize. They'll reach us eventually. Julia pulls out her phone. No signal, of course. I look at my hands, now half covered in leaf-like patches. The transformation is spreading faster now. In a day, maybe less, I'll be like them. That's when I see him, a leaf figure standing apart from the others. Even from this distance, I recognize the pattern that makes up its face. Danny. Despite everything, I feel a strange peace. My brother wasn't eaten or killed by a bear like everyone thought. He became part of the forest. "Victor," Julia's voice breaks through. "My thoughts. Your research, the notes about all this, they're in your backpack, right?" I nod. "Someone needs to warn people, to document what's happening here. I understand what she's saying. One of us needs to escape to tell the story. And with my skin already changing, it can't be me. There's a maintenance road about half a mile east of here," I tell her, pointing. "If you can reach it, it leads straight to the main park entrance. What about you?" I show her my arms, the leaf-like skin now reaching my elbows. "I think I'm already part of this place." Julia shakes her head, tears in her eyes. "There must be a way to stop it." "Take my backpack," I say, shrugging it off. "All my notes, the photos, everything is in there. Make sure people know." Below us, the leaf pile has grown to 6 feet high. They're climbing closer. When I give the signal, you climb down the far side and run east. Don't stop. Don't look back. "And you?" I pull out my last emergency flare. "I'll distract them." She hugs me tight. "I'll come back with help." We both know there won't be any help, but I nod anyway. I wait until the leaf pile reaches 10 feet high. Some of the leaf people have merged together into larger forms, reaching higher. "Now!" I shout, igniting the flare and throwing it into the densest cluster of leaf figures. The red fire catches quickly, spreading through the dry leaves. The leaf people scatter in what seems like pain or fear. Julia climbs down the opposite side and drops the last few feet. I watch her sprint into the trees, my backpack bouncing against her back. As the fire burns below me, I feel a strange pull. The leaf patches on my skin seem to vibrate, eager to join the fleeing leaf people. I make my choice. Climbing down into the chaos, I call out to the leaf figure with Danny's face. It turns, those hollow eyes fixing on me. I'm coming with you, I say. The burning leaf people retreat into the forest. The one that might be Danny waits for me, extending a hand made of red maple leaves. As I take it, the strangest feeling washes over me, like sinking into a warm bath. The leafy skin spreads faster, covering my chest, my legs, my face. But I'm not afraid anymore. I feel the forest itself welcoming me. The trees, the soil, the endless cycle of seasons, all opening to receive me. And somewhere in that vastness, I sense Danny's presence, not gone, but transformed. 2 hikers come through the clearing. Their voices seem distant, unimportant. But something makes me notice them. A child with them has wandered off the trail, heading toward a sinkhole hidden under bright leaves. Without thinking, I step forward, guiding the child back to safety. The hikers don't see me clearly, just a blur of autumn colors moving among the trees. As I fade back into the forest, I hear one of them say, "Did you see that ranger? He just disappeared." Weeks later, Julia returns with park officials. They find no evidence of leaf people, just normal autumn decay. They blame fungal spores in the air, mass hallucination, carbon monoxide from a faulty camp stove. The park closes certain trails each autumn now, marking them as habitat restoration areas. And every October, when the leaves reach their brightest colors, hikers who wander off trail report being led back to safety by a tall ranger with auburn hair who vanishes when they try to thank him. Years pass. Julia returns to Shenandoah as a seasoned photographer. She heads deep into the forest, to places most visitors never see. She sets up her camera on a tripod and waits. As the sun sets, casting golden light through the canopy, she captures her final shot of the season. A perfect pattern of leaves that forms a familiar face, one hand reaching toward the camera lens. In the photograph, you can almost see me smiling. My name is Thomas Harrington, and I've been a ranger at Olympic National Park for 2 years now. This morning started like any other day. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in soft colors. A light mist hung around the tall Douglas. For trees, as I began my morning walk through the forest, the park was beautiful that morning. Spider webs, covered in tiny drops of water, sparkled between tree branches. I could hear elk calling to each other far away in the valley. Everything looked perfect, peaceful. I took a deep breath, enjoying the smell of pine trees. That smell always helped calm my mind when memories of the war tried to creep back in. The forest had been my medicine these past 2 years. But then I noticed something odd. The forest was too quiet. No birds were singing, no squirrels were chattering. In the trees, just silence, heavy and uncomfortable, like the air before a big storm. Then the mist started acting strange. Instead of spreading out evenly like normal fog, it swirled around certain trees, as if it had a mind of its own. I'd never seen anything like it in all my time outdoors. I grabbed my radio to call it in, but all I got was static. Just my luck. The nearest ranger station was 17 miles away, and I was on my own. That's when I saw the fox. It ran across the path ahead of me, then stopped and turned. Animals usually run from people, but this fox just stood there, staring at me. Its eyes looked different, almost like it was trying to warn me. Then suddenly, it took off running like something terrifying was chasing it. The trail ahead disappeared into a wall of thick fog. This wasn't normal morning mist. It seemed to swallow up all sound. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps when I got close to it. I realized I was getting close to Whispering Valley. The local tribes never went there, and they had good reasons for everything they did. Maybe I should have paid more attention to their stories. Suddenly, the air turned ice cold. I could see my breath making little clouds in front of my face. Just moments before, it had been a warm June morning. Something was very wrong in these woods today. I should have turned back right then. But 20 years as a ranger teaches you to trust yourself, to believe there's a logical explanation for everything. So I kept walking forward, my hand resting on the knife at my belt, unaware that I was being watched by something that had been waiting for me for a very long time. People tell me I have a weathered face. There's a scar above my right eye that I got during the war. Korea was hell on earth. I worked as a field medic there, trying to save soldiers who were badly hurt. Too many of them died while I was trying to help them. Those faces still visit me in my dreams sometimes. That's why I came out here to the Olympic Peninsula. I thought the quiet and the trees might help chase away the nightmares, help me forget the guilt I feel for not saving everyone. Most nights, it works, but not always. I'm a careful man. That's what the war taught me. I write down everything I see in my little notebook. Tracks, weather changes, anything unusual. Some of the other rangers laugh at how detailed my notes are, but that's just who I am. I always wear my father's old watch. It doesn't keep perfect time anymore, but it reminds me of him. And I carry something else too. A photo of my brother, James. He died in the war. Sometimes when I'm alone in the forest, I talk to his picture. Sounds crazy, I know, but it helps. My fingers reach for the knife at my belt. The one Sergeant Miller gave me before he died. I do this without thinking. Whenever I get nervous, it's become a habit. I know every trail in my part of the forest, every rock, every turn, every old fallen tree. But lately, things seem different. A boulder that should be on the left side of a path is suddenly on the right. A distinctive bent tree appears to have straightened overnight. Small things that nobody else would notice, but they jump out at me. I've seen other strange things too, but I haven't told anyone about them. They'd think I need to see a doctor. Maybe send me to talk to a psychiatrist. I've had enough of doctors poking around in my head after the war. Lately, my dreams have been changing. I see tall, strange shadows standing between trees, just watching me. I wake up sweating, heart pounding. The locals have stories about these woods. Tales about things that hunt in the mist, that take people who wander too far from the trails. I never believed them. I've always thought that the wilderness follows rules. Rules I understand. If you know the rules, you'll be safe. But as I stood, they're watching that strange fog curl around the trees ahead. I started to wonder if maybe I don't know all the rules after all. I walked a bit further and found strange tracks in the soft dirt. They weren't human, too long and narrow for that, but they weren't from any bear or deer either. They looked like someone had dragged long, thin fingers through the mud. And they led deeper into the forest, toward that weird fog. Then suddenly everything went quiet, not just quiet like before. This was different. It felt like someone had turned off all sound in the world. The pressure changed in my ears, like when you drive up a steep mountain. It felt wrong. I kept walking and noticed something on the trees. About 6 feet up, there were claw marks, deep ones that had ripped away the bark in long strips. No animal I know could do that. Not that high up, not like that. There was a smell in the air too, sharp and metallic, like the air smells after lightning hits nearby. But there wasn't a cloud in the sky. When I rounded the next bend in the trail, I found a campsite. A little tent was set up neatly. A small fire pit still had glowing embers. There was a coffee mug next to a log, and when I touched it, the coffee was still warm. Someone had been here just minutes ago, but there was no sign of them now, like they had vanished into thin air in the middle of their breakfast. I pulled out my compass to get my bearings, but the needle just spun around and around, never stopping. I tried my flashlight too, even though it was daytime. It flickered on and off, even though I'd just put in new batteries that morning. That's when I heard it, whispering. So faint I almost missed it. It sounded like someone calling my name, and the voice, It sounded exactly like my brother James, but that was impossible. James died in Korea 5 years ago. "James?" I called out, feeling foolish. My voice seemed swallowed up by the forest. Around the next corner, I found a deer lying on the trail. At first, I thought it was sleeping, but when I got closer, I saw it was dead. There wasn't a mark on it, no blood, no wounds. But it looked empty somehow, like something had drained all the life out of it. I decided it was time to head back to the ranger station. But as I turned around, nothing looked familiar anymore. Trees that should have been on my right were now on my left. A big rock I'd passed earlier was nowhere to be seen. I'm not a man who panics easily, but I felt my heart beating faster. I picked what looked like the right direction and started walking quickly. But after 20 minutes, I came across a small pond I'd never seen before. It wasn't on any of my maps. That's when I knew for sure. The trails were changing. Somehow, the forest itself was moving around me like it was trying to keep me here. I was standing by that strange pond, trying to figure out which way to go, when I saw it for the first time. Just a quick flash between the trees, something tall and thin watching me. At first, I thought it might be another ranger, but no person could be that tall or that skinny. It disappeared as soon as I turned to look at it straight on. The sun was starting to go down now, and I could feel eyes on me. Not like when a deer or bear watches you from the bushes. This felt colder, like whatever was watching me was thinking about what I might taste like. I caught more glimpses as the forest got darker. It had arms and legs that were too long, bending in ways that arms and legs shouldn't bend. Its skin looked rough, like the bark of a tree that had been burned in a forest fire. Then I heard voices calling for help from different directions. One sounded like an old man, another like a young woman. I recognized those voices. They belonged to hikers who had been reported missing a few weeks back. We never found them. I started running then, trying to find my way back to any trail I recognized, but every path I took seemed to lead me toward a deep ravine I'd never seen before. It was like the thing was herding me, blocking some paths and leaving others open. I pulled out my service revolver and fired a shot at the tall shape when it appeared again. The bullet went right through it, like it was made of smoke. It didn't even seem to notice. It moved like nothing I've ever seen. Sometimes it was far away, watching from between distant trees. Then, without warning, it would be right in front of me, its face just inches from mine. I couldn't make out any eyes, but I knew it was looking at me. It made a sound, too, a low humming that I could feel in my chest, more than hear with my ears. When that sound got louder, my head would get fuzzy and my legs would feel heavy. I had to fight to stay awake. The fog started moving with purpose now, forming walls that blocked certain paths, forcing me deeper into the forest, away from where I thought the ranger station might be. Even the plants seemed to be working against me. Vines on the ground caught my feet, making me trip. Branches whipped across my face as I ran past, cutting my skin. It was like the whole forest had turned against me, helping this thing hunt me down. Night was falling fast, and I knew I couldn't keep running in the dark. I needed a plan, and I needed one quick. My flashlight was useless now. It wouldn't stay on for more than a few seconds at a time. And that thing, it seemed to be getting bolder as the darkness grew. I stumbled through the trees, my breath coming in ragged gasps, knowing that the thing in the forest was just playing with me, like a cat with a mouse. It could have taken me any time, but it was enjoying the chase. As I ran through the darkening forest, a memory flashed in my mind. Something an old tribal elder had told me when I first started working at the park. He'd warned me about night walkers, tall shadows that hunted in the mist. They cannot cross running water, he'd said. I had smiled politely back then, thinking it was just a story. It didn't seem like just a story anymore. Moonlight Falls was somewhere nearby, a small waterfall that fed into the river. If I could reach it, maybe I'd be safe. I changed direction, heading for where I thought the falls should be. My body was giving out. Cuts on my face and arms were bleeding. My legs felt like lead. Each breath burned in my chest. But I kept moving, because stopping meant death. Then the vision started. As I stumbled through the forest, I began seeing the faces of soldiers I couldn't save in Korea. They appeared between the trees, reaching out bloody hands, calling my name. I knew it wasn't real. The creature was somehow putting these images in my head, trying to make me give up. Not real, I gasped to myself. Keep moving. I could hear the falls now, the blessed sound of rushing water. I pushed harder, forcing my tired legs to carry me just a little further. I broke through a line of trees, and there it was, Moonlight Falls, silvery in the moonlight. But between me and the water stood the creature. Up close now, in the open, I could finally see it clearly. It was like a person, but all wrong. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at extra joints. Its skin wasn't skin at all, but looked like charred wood with deep cracks, where dull red light glowed from inside. Where a face should be, there was just a smooth, dark surface with a single split that slowly opened, revealing nothing but blackness inside. It reached for me with fingers. Too long and too many. My back was to a large tree. I couldn't go around. The thing had me cornered. With shaking hands, I pulled out my brother's lighter, the one I carry to look at his photo when it gets dark. I flicked it once, twice. On the third try, it lit. I grabbed some dry leaves from the ground and set them on fire, then touched the small flame to a low-hanging branch. The branch caught fire, and suddenly I had a torch. I swung it in front of me, and the creature hissed and backed away. It didn't like fire. I moved forward, waving my makeshift torch. The creature retreated, its long arms covering what might have been its face. I pushed forward, one step at a time, until my feet splashed into the cold water of the creek below the falls. I waded across, keeping my torch above the water. Once I reached the other side, I turned back to look. The creature stood at the water's edge, swaying slightly. That humming sound grew louder, angrier. It paced back and forth but wouldn't step into the water. I had escaped. For now. 3 days later, a search party found me huddled by the river miles downstream. I told them what happened, but I could see. In their eyes, they didn't believe me. One Ranger, Johnson, did come back with me to look for evidence. He crossed the falls despite my warnings. The mist came from nowhere. Johnson stepped into it, curious. I heard him scream once. When the mist cleared, all that was left was his boot. That was 7 years ago. I retired from the Ranger service. They said it was PTSD from the war finally catching up with me. Maybe they're right, but I don't think so, because every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. I wake up. And there in the corner of my bedroom stands a tall shadow. It doesn't move, it doesn't try to hurt me, it just watches. And sometimes when the night is very quiet, I can hear it whisper in my brother's voice. I'll wait as long as it takes, Tommy. We have all the time in the world. They'll find more missing hikers in Olympic National Park next year. 7 years will have passed. The cycle will begin again. And I'll still be waking up at 3:17 every morning, looking at the shadow in my corner, wondering when it will finally get tired of watching and decide to take me too. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. My name is Michael Winslow. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 3 years now. Most days, I love my job. Today is different. The leaves are changing all around me, bright reds, oranges, and golds as far as I can see. They make a satisfying crunch under my boots as I walk the trail. It's beautiful, but something doesn't feel right. It's early October, and the busy tourist season is finally winding down. Usually, I enjoy the quiet after months of answering the same questions and pointing to the same landmarks. I like being alone out here At least I used to. I whistle as I check the trail markers, making sure they're all still visible and pointing the right way. The wind blows gently through the hickory trees, making them sway like they're dancing. Up above, hawks circle in the clear blue sky. I can hear a stream bubbling somewhere nearby, running over rocks covered in bright green moss. Everything seems normal. Then I see it. Something that doesn't belong. Off to the side of the trail, maybe 20 feet in, I spot several deer carcasses. They're arranged in a perfect circle, which is not something that happens in nature. I've seen plenty of animal kills before, wolves, coyotes, even the occasional black bear, but never anything like this. The organs are missing from each. Deer, but the meat is untouched. No scavenger I know is that picky. I pull out my notebook and write down what I see, trying to keep my hand steady. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe some kids are playing a sick joke. But deep down, I know better. The weather changes suddenly, like someone flipped a switch. A cold front moves in fast, bringing fog so thick I can barely see my hand. In front of my face. It's not normal for this time of year. The fog seems to pour into the valley floor like water, filling every dip and hollow. I reach for my radio to call it in. Base, this is Ranger Winslow. I'm on the East Trail near Hollow Hills. I've found something strange, some kind of... The radio crackles with static, cutting off my words. Through the noise, I hear fragments of a response. Copy that. Trouble. Back. Then, between the bursts of static, something else. A howl. Not a wolf or a coyote. Something different, something wrong. I clip the radio back to my belt and look around. Usually these woods are full of life. Squirrels darting between trees, birds chirping, insects buzzing. But now there's nothing. Complete silence. It's like everything ran away, everything that could. The trail ahead is washed out from recent rain. A section maybe 10 feet long has turned to mud and slid down the hillside. I'll have to find another way. I check my map and see I can cut through a small valley, though it'll add an hour to my route. As I fold up my map, I realize where I am. The locals call this area Hollow Hills. My mind drifts to the stories I've heard from the older rangers and some of the Cherokee guides who sometimes help with tours. They talk about this place in whispers. Stories about men who become beasts during blood moons. Old legends, nothing more. At least that's what I've always told myself. A smell hits me suddenly, strong and unmistakable. Wet dog, but bigger, muskier, the kind of smell that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. But there shouldn't be any dogs out here. No domestic animals at all. The park doesn't allow them on this trail, and there are no wild canines. Big enough to make a smell this powerful. I stand perfectly still, trying to pinpoint where it's coming from. But the smell seems to be everywhere at once, like I'm already surrounded. Something is wrong in these hills. And I'm starting to think, I'm not alone out here after all. I wasn't always a park ranger. 3 years ago, I was a police officer in Nashville. I thought I'd spend my whole life there, keeping people safe. Then came the night that changed everything. It was dark, raining. I got a call about someone suspicious behind a convenience store. When I arrived, I saw a figure holding what looked like a gun. I shouted for them to drop it. They turned quickly. I fired. It was a kid, 16 years old, with a plastic toy gun. He lived, thank God, but I couldn't stay on the force after that. Couldn't face the looks from my fellow officers, the whispers from people on the street. Most of all, I couldn't face myself. So I ran. Applied for a job where I thought I'd be alone with just trees and animals and hikers who didn't know my name or what I'd done. The isolation of ranger work seemed perfect. No more split-second decisions, no more guns pointed at people. My grandpa used to say I looked just like him. Same broad shoulders, same serious face. I even started going gray early, just like he did. Funny thing is, he was a game warden right here in these mountains. Back in 1927, he went out on patrol and never came back. They searched for weeks, but found nothing. I reach into my pocket and feel his old silver compass. It's the only thing of his I have. Mom gave it to me when I got this job, said it was found among his things at the station. Sometimes it acts weird, pointing in directions that can't possibly be north. I've learned not to rely on it, but I keep it with me anyway. It makes me feel connected to him somehow. I pull out the latest letter from Charlotte, my fiancée. Or maybe soon-to-be ex-fiancée. Her words are getting colder with each letter. I don't know who you are anymore, Michael. When are you coming back to real life? I can't wait forever. I don't blame her. Who wants to be engaged to a man hiding in the mountains? 3 years I've been walking these trails and I still get lost sometimes. There are hollows and valleys here that seem to shift when you're not looking. Places where the compass spins in circles and the sun seems to move the wrong way across the sky. Other rangers say it's just the magnetic rocks in the mountains playing tricks. Maybe they're right. I should turn around and head back to the station. That would be the smart thing to do. But I've never been good at admitting when I'm in over my head. Dad always said it was my worst quality. Your pride will get you killed one day, Michael, he used to tell me. I always laughed it off. Last week, I had a strange dream. I was running through these same woods, but not on 2 legs. I was on all 4s, racing through the underbrush, feeling powerful and hungry. When I woke up, there was dirt in my bed and scratches on my arms. Probably just fell out of bed and scraped myself on the nightstand. That's what I told myself anyway. The radio at my hip buzzes again. It's Jones from the station. Winslow, you. And there, we've got another missing person report. Family of hikers near your area. 3rd one this month, I reply. People need to stick to the marked trails. Maybe. But the husband showed up at the visitor center half an hour ago, covered in blood, not making any sense. Keeps talking about something that walks like a man but isn't one. I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Probably just a bear that spooked him, I say, trying to convince myself more than Jones. I'll keep an eye out. Be careful out there. Check in every hour, you hear me? Copy that, I say. But the static has already returned, swallowing my words. I've always thought people who go missing out here just got careless, didn't bring enough water, didn't check the weather, wandered off trail without a map. The mountains. Don't forgive mistakes. But now, with the fog pressing in and that strange smell getting stronger, I'm not so sure. Something feels wrong here, really wrong. And I'm walking straight toward it. I push deeper into the woods, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. That's when I see the trees. At first, I think it's vandalism. Someone with a knife or hatchet. But as I get closer, I realize these marks are different. Deep claw marks tear down the trunks, starting about 7 feet high, higher than a bear could reach, even standing on its back legs. The cuts are fresh, sap still oozing from them. Whatever made these marks is big, really big. I touch one of the gashes, 4 parallel lines, each as wide as my thumb. No animal in these mountains should be able to make marks like these. A sound stops me cold. A low, rumbling growl that seems to come from everywhere at once. I spin around, hand moving to my service revolver, the one thing I kept from my police days. Nothing, just trees and fog. The growl fades, but I can still feel it in my chest, like a bass note that won't stop vibrating. I pick up my pace, wanting to finish my patrol and get back to the station before dark. The trail curves ahead, and as I round the bend, I see it. A bright blue tent pitched in a small clearing. Not unusual on its own. People camp out here all the time, though they're supposed to register first. What is unusual is the condition of the tent. It's been ripped apart, torn from the inside out, like something was trapped in there and fought its way free. The fabric hangs in strips, and dark stains spatter the remaining pieces. Blood, a lot of it. I call out, "Park Ranger! Anyone here?" Only silence answers back. The smell hits me again, that wet dog smell, but stronger now, mixed with something else, something metallic. Blood. I search the area carefully, looking for any sign of the camper. Instead, I find something that makes my blood run cold. A metal badge, bent and chewed around the edges. I wipe away the dirt and can just make out the words Park Service and a date, 1927. My grandfather's badge, the one they never found after he disappeared. It can't be. This spot is miles from where they searched for him all those years ago. I put the badge in my pocket next to his compass, my hand shaking. Night will be here soon. I pull out my flashlight, even though it's still light enough to see. As I sweep the beam around, I catch something. Pairs of eyes reflecting in the trees around me. Not just one pair, many, watching. When I point the light directly at them, they vanish, but I can feel them still there, watching, waiting. I need to move, now. As I walk, I become aware of a sound, breathing, heavy and rhythmic, matching my pace step for step. I stop. It stops. I walk faster. It walks faster. Whatever it is, it's following me, staying just out of sight in the thick fog. I come to a small clearing and freeze. On the ground in front of me are tracks, wolf tracks, bigger than any I've ever seen. But that's not what scares me. What scares me is how the tracks change. They start as wolf prints, then gradually shift. The back pads elongating, the claws retracting until they become human footprints. Then 20 feet later, they shift back to wolf prints again. My mind can't make sense of what I'm seeing. It's impossible. Has to be a trick, two different animals walking the same path. But deep down, I know that's not it. The fog grows even thicker, closing in until I can barely see 10 feet ahead. Shapes loom in the mist, trees, rocks, bushes, all transformed into threatening shadows by my frantic imagination. Or maybe not just my imagination. I take out my map and compass, trying to get my bearings. My grandfather's compass spins wildly, never settling. The map shows I should be near Echo Ridge Trail, but nothing around me looks familiar. I've been walking for hours in what I thought was a straight line, but now I'm not so sure. I pick a direction and stick to it, counting my steps, trying to keep track of where I am. After 500 steps, I recognize a peculiar bent tree. I've seen it before, earlier today. I've been walking in a perfect circle. That's not possible. I know these woods. I know how to navigate, even in fog. Unless something is leading me in circles, herding me like a sheep, deeper and deeper into the hollow hills. I freeze as something moves at the edge of my vision, a shadow, darker than the rest. I turn slowly, and that's when I see it clearly for the first time. It stands on two legs like a man, but it's no man. It's huge, nearly 8 feet tall, with a body covered in thick, matted, dark fur. Its head is like a wolf's, with a long snout, and pointed ears that stand straight up, but its eyes are the worst part. They're not animal eyes, they're human, intelligent, watching me with a look that says it knows exactly what I'm thinking. The dogman, I don't know what else to call it, stays perfectly still. It's keeping its distance, about 50 yards away, just close enough that I can see it through gaps in the fog. When I take a step back, it takes a step forward. When I move left, it moves right, always keeping the same distance between us. It's herding me. I realize with a chill that it's been pushing me in the direction it wants me to go all along, deeper into the hills, away from trails, away from help. I see something on the ground ahead, another dead animal, a raccoon this time, torn apart and arranged in a pattern. Not random killing. It's placed there like a message or a warning. 10 feet further on, I find a rabbit, positioned the same way. The creature is leaving these for me to find, leading me along a gruesome trail of breadcrumbs. As I walk, small animals, squirrels, rabbits, even birds suddenly dart across my path, running as if chased. But chased by what? I can't see anything behind them. Then it hits me. The dogman is driving them toward me, testing how fast I move, learning how I react. The wind shifts, and for a brief moment the fog clears. Sunlight breaks through the clouds, and in that instant the creature vanishes, melting into the shadows between trees. But I know it's not gone. It's waiting. I pull out my revolver and check the bullets. 6 shots. Better than nothing, but will they even work against whatever this is? The sun disappears again, swallowed by thick clouds, and the fog rushes back in. With it comes a growl. Closer this time, much closer. I spin around and fire at a shape lunging from the mist. The shot hits. I hear a yelp of pain and see dark blood spatter the leaves. For a second I feel relief. I hurt it. It can bleed. But then I see something impossible. The creature stands just 30 feet away now, a bullet wound in its shoulder. As I watch, the wound pushes something out, my bullet flattened and useless. The torn flesh knits itself back together before my eyes. My heart pounds so hard I think it might burst. The creature's mouth opens, showing rows of yellowed teeth, each as long as my finger. Is it smiling at me? For the next hour, this becomes our dance. It disappears, then shows itself just long enough to keep me moving in the direction it wants. Sometimes it chases animals toward me. Sometimes it leaves mutilated bodies in my path, arranged in patterns that almost look like arrows pointing the way. Then I hear it, a sound that turns my blood to ice, a howl that starts like a wolf's but halfway through morphs into something else, a human scream filled with pain and rage. The howl echoes off the mountains, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I try to double back, to find my way to a trail I recognize, but every time I do, something blocks my path. Twice, trees fall directly in front of me, huge oaks that crash down with no warning, not rotted, not struck by lightning, just falling right when I try to pass. The temperature drops suddenly. My breath comes out in white clouds and frost forms on leaves around me. It's unnatural, cold that follows the creature like a shadow. I realize with growing horror that I'm being driven toward something. All day, the creature has been steering me, and I've been too blind to see it. But now I understand. It's taking me to its den, its home. The trail slopes downward, leading into a dark valley I've never seen before, never even heard mentioned by other rangers, a place where the trees grow twisted and the ground is bare of plant life. At the center of the valley sits a cave mouth, a black hole in the side of the mountain. I will not go in there. Whatever happens, I will not go into that cave. I turn to run, but the way back is blocked. The dogman stands there, no longer hiding. Its massive chest heaves with each breath, sending small clouds of steam into the cold air. Behind it, I spot movement, more shapes in the fog, smaller but similar. There's more than one. The sun is almost gone now. Night is coming, and I'm miles from safety, surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist. I spot something in the distance, the metal frame of an old fire tower rising above the trees. If I can reach it, maybe I can make a stand. Maybe I can survive until morning. I run, hearing the creatures howl behind me as the chase begins in earnest. My lungs burn as I run toward the fire tower. Behind me, I hear them coming, heavy footfalls and that awful breathing. The tower looms ahead, an old metal skeleton rising 50 feet above the trees. It hasn't been used in years, but it's my only hope. I reach the base and grab the rusted ladder, pulling myself up rung by rung. The metal creaks under my weight. Below, shadows gather, 3, maybe 4 dogmen circling the tower, looking up at me with those terrible human eyes. The largest one, the one that's been stalking me all day, throws back its head and howls. The others join in, creating a chorus that chills me to the bone. I reach the small platform at the top, a metal box barely big enough for 2 people. The door hangs half open on broken hinges. I squeeze inside and look for anything I can use. There's not much. An old chair, some empty bottles, a rusted stove used for heating. My mind races. Normal bullets don't work against these things. They just push them out and heal. But my grandfather's silver compass, The old stories always said silver could hurt monsters. With shaking hands, I take out the compass and break it open. Inside is a silver disc. I use my knife to cut it into small pieces, then carefully press them into the tips of my remaining bullets, creating makeshift silver bullets. It's a crazy idea, something from a horror movie, but I'm out of options. The tower shakes. I look, down to see the largest dogman ramming the support legs, trying to bring the whole structure down. The tower sways dangerously with each hit. Hours pass. Night falls completely. I've been awake for almost 20 hours straight, and exhaustion is taking its toll. I start seeing things. Dogmen climbing up the walls, reaching through the windows, with long claws. I blink, and they're gone, only to appear somewhere else a moment later. Worse than that, I'm starting to lose track of time. There are gaps, minutes, maybe hours, where I can't remember what happened. Once I wake up to find blood on my hands, with no memory of how it got there, a terrible thought creeps in. What if I'm becoming one of them? What if my grandfather never disappeared but transformed? What if that's our family curse? I shake, my head trying to clear it. That's crazy talk. The lack of sleep is making me paranoid. A massive crash shakes the tower. One of the support legs has buckled. The whole structure tilts to one side. I won't last much longer up here. Dawn is still hours away. I check my silver-tipped bullets. 5 left. Not enough for all the creatures I've seen. Another crash. The tower tilts further. One more hit and it will collapse. I make my choice. Better to face them on my terms than wait to be crushed. I climb down the ladder, each step careful on the tilting metal. As my feet touch the ground, they emerge from the darkness. The big one in front, 3 smaller ones behind. Their breath steams in the cold air. Come on then, I whisper, raising my gun. The fight is brutal and fast. My first shot catches the leader in the chest. The silver works, the wound smokes and doesn't close. The creature howls in pain, a sound so human it makes my skin crawl, but there are too many. While I focus on the leader, the others circle behind me. I feel claws tear through my jacket, into my back. Pain explodes across my shoulders. I spin and fire twice more, dropping 2 of the smaller dogmen. The last one lunges at me, jaws snapping. My 4th shot catches it in the throat. It's just me and the leader now. We face each other in the pale moonlight. Blood soaks my shirt, my blood. I'm getting weaker by the second. The dogman watches me, almost curious. Then it does something I don't expect. It speaks, a horrible garbled sound, but unmistakably words. "Grandson, join us." The voice is nothing I recognize, and yet something in it reminds me of old family recordings, of my grandfather. I raise my gun for one last shot, but I'm too slow. The creature leaps, covering the distance between us in an instant. Its weight knocks me down, and I feel those terrible teeth close around my throat. In my last moments, as my blood soaks into the forest floor, I understand at last. This is what happened to my grandfather, and now it's happening to me. 3 days later, a search party finds what's left of Ranger Michael Winslow. Just torn pieces of his uniform and a trail of bloody paw prints leading deeper into the hills. They follow the prints for a mile before giving up. Some things, the senior ranger tells them, are better left alone in these mountains. The search party packs up as night approaches. All except for one young ranger who lags behind, carefully, examining the paw prints. He hears it first, a familiar whistle, the same tune Winslow always used to whistle on patrol. He turns toward the sound and sees eyes reflecting in the darkness, eyes that look almost human. The young ranger is never seen again. 1 year later, hikers begin to disappear again in the area the locals call Hollow Hills. Rangers report hearing Winslow's distinctive whistle in places where people vanish. In the ranger station, a framed photo hangs on the wall. Michael Winslow, standing proudly in his uniform on his first day at the park. Next to it, An older photo of his grandfather in the same spot, taken almost a century earlier. If you look closely at both photos, you might notice something strange about their eyes. The camera flash reflects in them in exactly the same unnatural way. Not like human eyes at all, more like an animal's. My name is Donna Martinez, and I've been a park ranger at Death Valley National Park for 5 summers now. People always ask me how I can stand working in the hottest place in America, but the truth is, I've grown to love this harsh, beautiful landscape. Today started like any other day. The sun was already scorching hot by 7 a.m. as I began my patrol across Badwater Basin. Heat waves danced across the salt flats in the distance, making everything look wavy and unreal. Death Valley might sound scary to some folks, but to me, it's home. I stopped my ranger truck to take a quick water break and watch the morning light create rainbow patterns across the dried mineral deposits on the ground. It was so quiet and peaceful, just me and a single hawk circling in the cloudless blue sky. These are the moments I live for, when it feels like the desert is sharing its secrets with me. But something felt off today. As I walked around, I noticed some strange footprints in the sand. They looked human, but they were too light for how big they seemed to be. Like whoever made them wasn't pressing down as much as they should have been. I took some photos with my phone to document them. Working alone in places like this, you learn to pay attention to details that don't seem right. I was about to get back in my truck when I noticed a big dark cloud forming over the mountains. This was weird. We weren't supposed to get any storms today, and thunderheads don't usually form this quickly. The cloud grew bigger by the minute, but no rain fell. It just sat there like it was watching the valley. My radio crackled to life, but instead of hearing the usual check-in from base, I heard voices speaking what sounded like English played backwards. I tried adjusting the frequency, thinking was picking up some kind of interference, but the strange talking continued for about 30 seconds before stopping completely. "Base, this is Ranger Martinez. Do you copy?" I said into the radio. Nothing but static. I was putting the radio back when I spotted a coyote about 50 feet from my truck. Normally, coyotes keep their distance from people, but this one was walking straight toward me. Its eyes locked with mine in a way that made my skin crawl. Animals don't make eye contact like that. The coyote stopped right at my feet, dropped something small and white on the ground, and then trotted away. I bent down to look and felt my stomach turn. It was a human tooth, not old and yellowed, but white and recently lost. Before I could think too much about what this meant, my radio finally buzzed with a normal voice. "All rangers be advised. Flash flood warnings in sectors 4 through 7. Redirect patrols accordingly." Great. That meant I needed to take the old service road that cuts through the eastern canyons, a route we rarely use because of how isolated it is. As I drove, I realized I was entering the edges of what used to be Shoshone tribal land. Years ago, an elder had shown me ancient pictographs in a cave nearby. They depicted what he called Skinstealers, creatures that thirsted for both water and human life. I never put much stock in old legends, but I couldn't help remembering those cave paintings as the strangest thing yet happened: the temperature. In my truck suddenly dropped from 110 degrees to about 90 degrees in seconds. The windshield actually frosted over, right there in the middle of Death Valley in July. Before I could even process what was happening, the temperature shot back up, and the frost melted away like it had never been there. I wiped sweat from my forehead and took a deep breath. Something was very wrong in my park today, and I had a feeling it was just beginning. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I drove down the dusty service road. The strange things happening today kept making me think of my father. He was a respected Navajo medicine man back on the reservation where I grew up. When I told him I was taking this job at Death Valley 5 years ago, his face had turned so serious. "Donna, Some places hold old spirits, he'd said. Death Valley is one of them. Find another park. But I didn't listen. I never really listened to Dad about the old ways. I was too busy trying to prove I was modern and scientific. My college degree in environmental science meant more to me than the traditions he tried to teach me. That choice created a wall between us that I've never been able to tear down. As I drove, I rubbed the burn scar on my left forearm, a mark from a childhood protection ceremony my father had performed. I told everyone it was from a cooking accident, too embarrassed to explain its real meaning. Now, with all these weird things happening, I found myself touching it for comfort. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the small leather pouch that held my father's protection amulet. I'd kept it all these years, even though I always claimed I didn't believe in its power. I slipped the cord around my neck and tucked the pouch under my uniform shirt. Just in case, I muttered to myself. My ex-husband Mike would have laughed if he saw me now. Our divorce finalized just 4 months ago, after 3 years of him complaining about my job. Who wants to live in the middle of nowhere? He'd ask. Who chooses rocks and sand over people? He never understood that I found peace in these wide open spaces that I couldn't find anywhere else. The only company I had these days was Vincent, my rescued desert tortoise. He was riding in his special carrier on the passenger seat. Normally he slept during drives, but today he was scratching at the carrier walls, his head bobbing up and down like he was trying to warn me about something. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked, glancing over at him. Vincent just stared at me with those ancient reptile eyes. Something had him spooked. I should know every inch of this park by now. 5 years of daily patrols meant I'd seen every canyon, every rock formation, every dried-up creek bed. But today, things looked off. That big boulder shaped like a wolf's head should have been on my right, not my left. The dead juniper tree that marked the turn to Pikes Canyon was missing entirely. Had I taken a wrong turn? My ranger training kicked in, and I pulled over to mark my GPS coordinates and document these inconsistencies in my logbook. That's how I handle strange situations, with facts, notes, and photos. Record everything, panic later. I'd been having dreams lately that I hadn't told anyone about. In them, I'd be dying of thirst, finally finding water and lifting it to my lips only to watch it turn to blood in my mouth. The dreams started exactly 1 month ago and came every single night. As I sat in my truck writing notes about the landscape, changes, a chill ran down my spine despite the heat. Something wasn't right. All my survival training, all my knowledge of this park, all my scientific understanding, none of it explained what was happening today, and yet I couldn't bring myself to turn around and head back to the ranger station. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe something was drawing me forward, pulling me deeper into the heart of Death Valley. Whatever it was, my instincts were screaming at me to go back. But my mind, my rational, scientific mind wanted proof of what was happening. And so I put my truck in drive and continued down the service road, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being watched from all sides. The road ahead narrowed as I drove deeper into the canyon. My truck kicked up dust that hung in the air like a fog. I needed to focus on my driving, but something caught my eye, a flash of color that didn't belong in the desert browns and reds. I slowed down and spotted a small blue notebook half buried in the sand. I pulled over, put on my gloves, and picked it up. It was a hiker's journal, the pages wrinkled from heat and dew. Most hikers are good about packing out everything they bring in, so finding abandoned items always concerns me. I flipped through the pages. The first entries were normal, descriptions of trails, wildlife sightings, and beautiful views. But the last few entries made my blood run cold. Day 4. Someone is following our group, always keeping the same distance. Rangers said no one else is registered in this section. Day 5. Matt swears the person following us looks different today. Same clothes, but not the same face. Day 6. The person who changed faces is getting closer. No one believes me. I'm leaving. This trail tomorrow. There was no Day 7 entry. I put the journal in my pack and stood up. That's when I noticed something strange. Total silence had fallen. In the desert, there's always some sound. Wind blowing, small animals scurrying, distant cars on the main road. But now, nothing. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps on the gravel. I clapped my hands. Nothing. The sound was swallowed up like it never happened. My heart began to pound as I walked back to my truck. 10 feet away from it, I spotted something on the ground that made me freeze. A park ranger uniform, torn to shreds and stained with something dark brown. I recognized the name tag, R. Collins. Randy Collins was supposed to be on vacation in Colorado. I'd covered his shifts myself. I took out my phone to photograph the uniform, but stopped when a strange smell hit me. Freshly turned soil and burning sage. Impossible smells for this dry, barren place. The sage smell reminded me of cleansing rituals my father used to perform. Back in my truck, I tried the radio again. Base, this is Martinez. I found Ranger Collins' uniform in Sector 7. It appears damaged. Collins is not present. Please advise. Only static answered me. I decided to continue forward until I could get a signal. Around the next bend, I came upon something so strange I had to stop again. A perfect line of water bottles was arranged on the ground, each filled with reddish liquid. They formed an arrow pointing toward a small cave opening I'd never noticed before. This wasn't random. Someone or something was sending me a message. I checked my GPS to mark the location of the cave, but the screen showed 5 different pins, all claiming to be my current position. According to the GPS, I was simultaneously at 5 places, miles apart from each other. Great, I muttered, turning it off and back on. Same result. My radio suddenly crackled to life on its own. What came through made me drop it in shock. The sound of someone drinking water, gulping it down desperately, interrupted by my own voice saying coordinates I didn't recognize. I picked up the radio with shaking hands and turned it off. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned quickly and saw a dust devil, a small desert whirlwind, forming around my truck. But this wasn't a normal dust devil. It grew thicker and taller until I couldn't see through it at all. My truck was surrounded by a spinning wall of sand. I waited 5 minutes for it to die down, which it finally did, settling back to the desert floor as if nothing had happened. Determined to get back to base and report everything, I turned my truck around. But after driving for 20 minutes straight on what should have been a direct route back, I found myself passing the same odd-shaped boulder I'd seen earlier. I'd been driving in a straight line, but somehow I'd looped back to the same spot. Tried again, carefully watching my surroundings. Same result. No matter which direction I drove, I ended up back at this place. As I sat there trying to make sense of what was happening, I noticed something about 50 yards away. Dark lumps on the ground. I grabbed my binoculars. Coyotes. 3 of them, lying still. Something was wrong with how they looked. Too smooth in some places. I needed to check it out. I approached carefully and nearly got sick when I saw what had happened. The coyotes' skins had been removed with surgical precision, leaving their bodies intact underneath. No animal predator could do this, and no human hunter would leave the meat untouched. Whatever was happening in Death Valley today was getting worse, and I was trapped right in the middle of it. I hurried back to my truck. The image of those skinned coyotes burned into my mind. As I reached for the door handle, movement on the ridge caught my eye. A figure was standing there, waving at me. Even from this distance, I could tell it was wearing a ranger uniform. Randy Collins. But something looked off about him. I raised my binoculars. It looked like Randy, but his face didn't seem to fit right. So, like his skin was a shirt that was 1 size too big. He smiled and waved again, then pointed toward the mysterious cave. "Randy?" I called out, but my voice sounded small in the vast desert. I watched him through the binoculars as I slowly backed toward my truck. No matter how fast or slow I moved, the figure maintained the exact same distance from me. When I took 3 steps back, it moved 3 steps forward. When I moved sideways, it shifted sideways too. That's when I noticed how it moved. All wrong. Its knees bent backwards sometimes. Its head turned almost all the way around without the rest of the body moving. My stomach knotted up. This wasn't friendly. I dove into my truck, locked the doors, and tried the radio again. Emergency! This is Ranger Martinez in Sector 7. I need immediate... Before I could finish, the radio crackled, and my own voice came through, perfectly mimicking what I'd just said. Then it continued. Heading back to base. Situation normal. Martinez out. Then the base responded, copy that, Martinez. See you soon. Whatever was pretending to be Randy had just cut off my chance for help. I started my engine, but heard a sharp hiss from under the hood. I popped it open and found my radiator had been punctured. Coolant was leaking everywhere. Stuck to the radiator cap was a Park service knife, Randy's knife, based on the carved initials on the handle. It had disabled my truck while I was looking at the coyotes. I grabbed my emergency pack, water, and gun. Vincent's carrier was empty. Where was my tortoise? I looked around frantically but couldn't see him anywhere. I hoped he'd crawled under the truck for shade and safety. The figure was now at the bottom of the ridge, walking toward me with that same wrong-jointed movement. I raised my service weapon. "Stop right there!" I shouted. "Identify yourself!" It kept coming. I fired a warning shot into the air. No reaction. I aimed at its leg and fired. The bullet hit, but what happened next made no sense. The thing wearing Randy's face paused, looked down at the wound, and then the skin around it simply loosened. A piece of what looked like Randy's face slipped down like a mask being removed. And underneath, I caught a glimpse of something shiny and scaly, iridescent, like fish scales but dry. It pulled the sagging skin back into place and continued walking toward me. I fired again, this time hitting it squarely in the chest. It stumbled back, more of the skin slipping to reveal those scales underneath. It retreated quickly behind a rock formation. My hands shaking, I grabbed my backpack and all the water I could carry. I needed to find shelter and a defensible position. As I set off on foot, I noticed that every water source I passed had been destroyed. The emergency water cache that should have been under marker 22 was torn open, the bottles punctured. The small natural spring at the base of Walker Canyon was blocked with rocks and dirt. It was cutting off my water sources deliberately. The sun beat down mercilessly as I hiked toward what I hoped was the ranger outpost in Sector 6. I kept checking behind me, but never saw the creature directly. Instead, I caught glimpses of movement just at the edge of my vision. It was herding me, I realized, pushing me to go where it wanted. After an hour of walking, I heard it, a sound like fingernails tapping on glass. Click, click, click. It came from everywhere and nowhere. I ducked behind a boulder and waited, listening. The clicking stopped, then started again, closer to me. I peeked out and saw nothing. Ahead of me, I spotted a series of rock cairns, stacked stones that marked a trail. I'd built some of these myself last season. They would lead me to safety, but as I approached them, something impossible happened. The top rock on the nearest cairn lifted on its own and moved to a different position, changing the direction the cairn was pointing. Then the next cairn did the same, and the next. The trail markers were changing themselves, leading me into a maze-like canyon system I knew was dangerous. Flash floods had carved these narrow passages, and they could become death traps in minutes if rain fell in the mountains. I turned to go back the way I came, but found new cairns had appeared behind me, forming a path I hadn't seen before. Ahead or back, I was being directed deeper into the trap. I chose a third option, climbing up the canyon wall to get a better view. As I scaled the rocky slope, I noticed something strange happening to the ground where the creature had walked. Small plants were sprouting from the barren soil, but not normal desert plants. These were dark and waxy, with thorns that glistened with some kind of fluid. I recognized them from my botany training. highly toxic species that shouldn't even grow in this climate. From my higher vantage point, I could see the entire system of canyons laid out before me. The creature had been herding me toward a dead end, a box canyon with no way out except the way I came in. It wanted me trapped. It was smart, and it was patient. I climbed back down on the opposite side from where I'd come up, hoping to circle around back to my truck. But I knew the creature, the skinwalker from the pictographs, was hunting me now, and it seemed to know Death Valley even better than I did. The sun was starting to set, painting the canyon walls red and orange. My mouth was dry, and I had only half a bottle of water left. I'd been walking for hours, trying to find my way back to the main road. I suddenly remembered something my father had told me long ago. He said skinwalkers needed permission to take new forms. They had to be invited in somehow. I thought about Randy Collins. Had he unknowingly given this thing permission? Had the missing hiker? I pulled out my father's amulet from under my shirt and held it tightly. For the first time in years, I wished I'd paid more attention to the old stories, the old ways. Looking at my map, I realized I was near a place called Devil's Golf Course, a vast area of jagged salt formations that formed a natural maze. If I could make it there, maybe I could lose the creature in the labyrinth of salt crystals. My legs ached as I pushed forward. The dehydration was getting worse, making my head pound. I started seeing things that couldn't be there. Water pools that disappeared when I got close. People waving from distant ridges who vanished when I blinked, or were they hallucinations? Maybe the creature could appear in different places at once. Maybe what I was seeing was real. I stumbled into Devil's Golf Course just as the last light faded from the sky. The salt formations rose around me like miniature mountains, sharp enough to cut skin. I carefully picked my way through them, using my flashlight as little as possible to avoid giving away my position. The clicking sound started again, fingernails on glass. It seemed to come from all directions at once, bouncing off the salt walls around me. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Donna? Thank God I found you." I swung around, nearly dropping my flashlight. Mike, my ex-husband, was standing 10 feet away, looking worried. "The ranger station said you hadn't checked in." "I drove out to look for you," he said, stepping closer. For a moment I almost believed it was him, but Mike would never come looking for me, and he wouldn't know where to find me in this maze. "Stay back," I said, pointing my gun at him. "Donna, it's me. Put the gun down." He held out his hand. "You're dehydrated. You're not thinking straight." His concern sounded so real, so much like the Mike I'd once loved. But I noticed something. He wasn't sweating. No one could be in Death Valley at night without at least a sheen of sweat. "What was the name of our first dog?" I asked, my voice steady despite my fear. Mike's face, or the thing wearing Mike's face, went blank for just a second. "What?" "Donna, we need to go. Now. Answer the question. What was our dog's name?" A smile spread across his face, too wide, stretching the skin unnaturally. "Why don't you tell me?" I fired a shot into the air. "Get away from me!" Mike's form shimmered slightly, like a heat wave passing through it. Then it turned and ran with that wrong-jointed movement deeper into the salt maze. I ran in the opposite direction, heart pounding. I needed to find shelter, someplace defensible. After what felt like hours of wandering through the salt formations, I spotted something in the distance, a dark opening in the canyon wall. A cave. As I got closer, I realized with a chill that it was the same cave the water bottles had been pointing toward earlier. Had I been herded here all along? I hesitated at the entrance, shining my flashlight inside. The beam revealed ancient pictographs on the walls, the same Skinstealer drawings I'd seen years ago. This was a place the Shoshone people had marked as dangerous. But I had nowhere else to go. I entered the cave, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. The pictographs seemed to tell a story. People encountering creatures that wore human skins, ceremonies to bind these creatures, warnings about water and thirst. At the back of the cave, was a small spring, actual water bubbling up from the ground. I couldn't believe my luck until I noticed the water had a strange reddish tint. Just like in my dreams, the clicking sound echoed through the cave, louder than before. I turned to see a figure blocking the entrance, Randy again, but his skin hanging even looser now, like it might slip off at any moment. I grabbed the amulet around my neck and remembered another thing my father had taught me. Names have power. Ancient words have power. Yi Naldlushi, I said, using the Navajo word for skinwalker. The figure flinched. I continued speaking in Navajo, words I hadn't used since childhood, phrases from protection ceremonies I'd witnessed. I didn't know if they would work, but it was all I had. "You can't have my form," I said in Navajo. "I do not invite you. I do not permit you." The creature hissed, a sound no human throat could make. It took a step forward, then stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. The amulet in my hand grew warm. For a moment, we were at a standoff. Me holding the amulet, speaking my father's language, and the creature trying to push forward against whatever force was holding it back. Then I heard voices and saw flashlight beams outside the cave. Help had come. "In here!" I shouted. "I'm in here!" The beams approached, and I saw another park ranger entering the cave, Jake Wilkins from the North Station. Relief flooded through me. "Donna, are you okay?" Jake asked, looking concerned. "We got your distress call hours ago." I hadn't made any distress call. I looked behind him and saw Randy, another Randy, standing there looking exactly like the one that was just inside the cave with me. "Jake," I said slowly, "there's only one of us in here, right?" "Me." Jake looked confused. "Yeah, just you." "Why?" I looked to where the skinwalker had been standing. Nothing there now. Had it somehow moved behind me, taken Jake's form? "Which one is real?" I whispered, looking between the two Randys. They looked identical now. "What are you talking about?" Jake asked. "Donna, you're severely dehydrated. Let's get you out of here." I didn't move. "Randy," I said, "tell me something only the real Randy would know." Both Randys started speaking at exactly the same time, using exactly the same words, telling the same story about a training exercise we'd done last spring. Jake looked from one Randy to the other, his face going pale. "What the hell?" he whispered. I raised my gun, not knowing which one to aim at. In that moment of hesitation, one of the Randys moved with impossible speed, grabbing Jake and pulling him outside the cave before I could react. I heard Jake scream, then silence. I waited in that cave until morning, clutching my father's amulet and my gun, speaking Navajo words whenever I heard movements outside. When dawn came, I finally ventured out. There was no sign of Jake or either Randy, just footprints leading away from the cave, normal at first, then changing to something no human feet could make. I hiked 10 miles to the main road, where a tourist couple found me and drove me to the ranger station. I told my story to the chief ranger, who organized a search. They found my truck, Jake's truck, and the remains of what might have been Jake. I couldn't bring myself to look. They never found Randy Collins. A week later, his torn uniform and ID were discovered 50 miles away in Nevada. I requested a transfer the next day, but it was denied. My supervisor, Chief Williams, said they needed experienced rangers, especially with 2 now missing. But I noticed small things about Chief Williams in the following weeks. How he never seemed to sweat anymore. How sometimes his movements looked just a bit off. How he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking. I stayed at Death Valley for 3 more years before finally getting my transfer. I have a daughter now. She's 10 years old and beautiful and smart. I've taught her our Navajo words and given her an amulet of her own. Most importantly, I've taught her a rule. If she ever hears my voice calling her when she can't see me, she must not answer unless I can tell her the secret word we've agreed on. And if someone who looks like me comes to pick her up, she must ask a question only I would know. Because sometimes things wear the faces of the people we love. And some thirsts. are never quenched. My name is Daniel Kovac, and I've spent 20 winters in Denali National Park. People call me the Iceman. Not very original, I know, but I've earned it. Today the wind is screaming across the snowfields like a living thing. I can barely see 10 feet ahead of me through all the blowing snow. Just another day at work for a park ranger in Alaska's frozen heart. Even with all this nasty weather, there's beauty here that takes my breath away. Tiny ice crystals dance in the air, making rainbow circles around the weak winter sun. In the distance, I can hear the glaciers cracking and groaning. They're alive in their own slow way. I'm out checking the emergency shelters along the park's northern edge. Standard routine, especially with this storm coming in. People get lost out here, and without these shelters, they don't last long. Not in Denali, not in winter. I stop my snowmobile when I spot something odd. Tracks in the snow, perfectly preserved despite the wind. They lead straight into a deep crack in the glacier. What's strange is there are no tracks coming back out. I've seen almost everything in these mountains, but this makes the hair on my neck stand up. I check my thermometer, -40 degrees Fahrenheit. That can't be right. The forecast said the Arctic front wasn't due for 3 more days. Something's off. I try my radio to call it in, but instead of headquarters, I get static and fragments of voices. Wait, is that a distress call? The voice sounds tinny and far away, mentioning coordinates I recognize, but the transmission is dated 1932. That's impossible. My dogs start acting strange. Shadow, my lead dog, refuses to go forward. The others join him, howling at nothing but empty air. Shadow's half-wolf, and his instincts have saved my life more than once. If he's spooked, there's a reason. I look at my map. Recent avalanches have blocked my usual route back. I'll have to detour through some areas I've never mapped. Not ideal, but I don't have much choice with night coming. The detour takes me near a valley the Athabascan people call Hunger's Shadow. Old stories say a spirit lives there that possesses starving travelers, turning them into something not human anymore. I'm not superstitious, but those stories came from somewhere. I exhale, and my breath freezes instantly in front of my face. The cloud hangs there, blinding me for a second. When it clears, I could swear I see something moving on the ridge above me. Just a shadow, gone when I look directly at it. Time to move. The storm is getting worse, and I need to find shelter before dark. But as I head toward the next emergency cabin, I can't shake the feeling that something out here is watching me, something that knows these mountains better than I do, and I don't think it wants me to leave. Most people don't understand why anyone would choose this life. 20 years in these mountains, and I still get asked why I don't move somewhere warmer. The answer is always on the tip of my tongue, but I never say it out loud. I'm hiding. 7 years ago, I was just another climber trying to conquer Everest. There were 5 of us on that expedition. I'm the only one who made it back. We got caught in a storm near the summit. Our guide died first, then the others, one by one. I can still see their faces. My climbing partners trusted me, and I failed them. The worst part, I ate the last of our rations while they slept. I told myself I needed strength to go for help. But deep down, I knew they were already too far gone. The tips of my ears and nose are permanently damaged from frostbite. People stare at my scars when they think I'm not looking. My eyes have turned this unnatural pale blue from years of snow glare. My daughter says they look like chips of glacier ice. When she still talked to me, that is. I take out my satellite phone and check the signal. Every Thursday at 6 p.m., I call Hannah. My daughter is the only family I have left, living in Seattle with her mum. She answers maybe 1 call out of 3. The reception gets worse each year, or maybe that's just an excuse I tell myself. Shadow nudges my hand with his snout, bringing me back to the present. He's not like other sled dogs. Part wolf, part something else. He knows when I get lost, in bad memories. The others follow his lead, but he follows something else. Something I can't see or hear. I touch the jade figure hanging around my neck. A Sherpa gave it to me after Everest, said it would protect me if I never took it off. I'm not superstitious, but I haven't removed it since. The one night I did, I woke up feeling like something was sitting on my chest, watching me. People don't survive up here by accident. 20 winters have taught me every trick. How to build a snow shelter in minutes. How to find food when there seems to be none. How to read the sky for weather changes. It's why the park keeps me on, despite my reputation for being difficult. But lately, I've been slipping. Last month, I ignored clear warning signs of a storm because my weather predictions said otherwise. Nearly froze to death when it hit 3 days early, just like this front moving in now. The patterns are changing, and my confidence might get me killed. The wind dies down for a moment, and in the silence I remember the dream I had last night. The same one I've been having for weeks, something chasing me through deep snow, something that walks on 2 legs but moves all wrong. In the dream, it always calls my name in my own voice. I snap out of it when Shadow growls. Time to focus. I've survived Everest and countless Alaskan winters. Whatever's out here, weather, wolves, or worse, I can handle it. I've looked death in the face before. As I restart the snowmobile, I can't shake the feeling that this time, death might be looking back. The research station appears through the swirling snow like a ghost. It's not on my patrol route, but with the weather turning, I need shelter. As I push open the door, something feels wrong right away. The lights are on. The heating system hums, but there's no one here. On the table sits 3 bowls of stew, frozen, solid. Chairs pushed back like the scientists left in a hurry. I touch one of the bowls. It's like stone. But why would the heating be on if they've been gone long enough for hot food to freeze? I call out, "Hello? Park Ranger!" My voice echoes, "Back!" Then I hear something that turns my blood cold, my own voice, calling from outside the station. "Help me, please, help!" I know it's not possible, but I grab my rifle anyway and head to the door. Nothing there but swirling snow. The voice calls, again, this time from the opposite direction. My voice, exactly as I sound when I'm scared. I check around the station and find blood in the snow, not just drops. Trails of it, moving in perfect circles. The strangest part is how they change. They start like an animal, dragging itself on 4 legs, then suddenly switch to just 2 feet, like something decided to stand up and walk. This air smells wrong. Even in this freezing cold where nothing rots, I smell decaying meat. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere. In a desk drawer, I find an old journal. The cover says 1957. The handwriting inside is frantic, describing the same things I'm seeing now. The writer mentions these events happen every 49 years. If that's true, then we're due for another cycle. I check my equipment. The thermometer is going crazy, jumping between 98 degrees above zero to 98 below. That's impossible. I tap it, shake it. Nothing helps. The wind picks up outside, and with it comes whispers. Names. The names of everyone I've watched die. My climbing partners from Everest. Details only I could know, like what Jamie said to me before he died, asking me to tell his Zunny was brave. No one else was there to hear that. Behind the station, I find something I wish I hadn't. A human rib cage, picked clean and frozen in the snow. I've seen animal kills before, but this is different. The teeth marks look almost human, but sharper, like someone filed their teeth to points. My eyes start to hurt from all the white, snow blindness setting in. As my vision blurs, I see something on the ridge, about 100 yards away, tall and thin, watching me. When I blink to clear my eyes, it's gone. I need to get back to headquarters. I follow my snowmobile tracks back, the way I came. But after a 1/4 mile, they just end. No new snow has fallen to cover them. It's like they were never there beyond that point, like time itself is being erased. Shadow whines and presses against my leg. He feels it too. Something is very wrong in this part of Denali. Whatever it is, it's been here before and it knows I'm here now. I need to keep moving. The sun will set in a few hours, and I don't want to find out what happens in this place. After dark, I see it clearly for the first time as the day's light starts to fade. It stands at the edge of a clearing, impossibly tall and thin. The creature must be at least 9 feet high, with skin stretched tight over its bones like dirty grey leather. From its head grow what look like deer antlers, but wrong somehow, twisted and sharp. I freeze, and it doesn't move either. For a long moment we just stare at each other across the snow. Then I blink, and it's gone. Over the next hour, as I push forward through deepening snow, I spot it again and again, always the same distance away. When I stop, it stops. When I move, it keeps pace. It's following me, I realize, waiting for something. Night comes and I have to make camp. I dig a snow shelter and crawl inside with Shadow pressed against me for warmth. The other dogs huddle at the entrance, nervous and alert. I don't think I'll sleep, but exhaustion takes over. I wake to whispers outside my shelter. Daniel, help me. I'm so cold. It's Jamie's voice, my climbing partner who died on Everest. Then Mark's voice joins in, then Sarah's, all of them, begging me for help, for food, for warmth, exactly as they sounded in their final hours. I cover my ears, but their voices get louder. Shadow growls, his eyes fixed on the shelter entrance. I risk a peek outside. The creature stands just 20 feet away. I can see it clearly in the moonlight. Its arms hang too low, nearly to its knees, with too many joints bending in wrong directions. Its face is almost human, but stretched, with sunken eye sockets. The eyes themselves are tiny pinpricks of red light. I reach for my rifle and fire. 3 shots directly at it. The bullets seem to slow down and freeze in midair, dropping harmlessly into the snow. The creature doesn't even flinch. I blink, and suddenly it's 30 feet to the left. I didn't see it move, it was just there. Another blink, and it's behind a tree. Each time it moves, I hear a horrible cracking sound, like bones breaking and resetting. By morning, I'm desperate to get back to headquarters. I pack up quickly and choose a path through a narrow valley. Halfway through, an avalanche crashes down behind me, cutting off my retreat. Minutes later, another avalanche blocks the path ahead. Every route I try gets blocked except one, leading deeper into the mountains, toward a place I've never explored. The creature is herding me like a sheep. The landmarks start playing tricks. On me, I pass a distinctive rock shaped like a wolf's head. 2 hours later, heading in a completely different direction, I pass the exact same rock again. It's impossible. As the day wears on, I notice something else. The ice and snow form strange patterns, lines and swirls that all seem to point in one direction, leading me somewhere. To a dark opening in the ice wall ahead that looks exactly like a cave entrance. I know I shouldn't go in there. Every instinct screams to turn around. But when I try, I find my tracks already covered. The wind has picked up, the temperature dropping. Fast. Night is coming again. The cave might be my only option for shelter now. As I approach it, Shadow pulls hard on his harness, trying to go the other way. He knows, but I don't have a choice anymore. Something has been planning this from the moment I found those first tracks in the snow. Planning and waiting, I just don't know what it wants from me. Inside the ice cave, the temperature is somehow warmer. I can hear water running somewhere deep. Below, a hot spring under the mountain. The sound is almost peaceful. I've been thinking about those old stories. The Athabascan tales about the Wendigo. The spirit that possesses those who give in to hunger and desperation. Those who betray others to save themselves. Just like I did on Everest, I understand now. This thing has been hunting me for years. Or maybe I've been calling it to me all this time, carrying my guilt like a beacon. My supplies are almost gone. Fingers numb from the cold, I fumble as I try to start a small fire. The dogs whine nervously, huddled in a tight circle, all except Shadow, who stands at the cave entrance, watching the darkness outside. I look at my hands. 2 fingertips are black with frostbite. I won't be able to feel them soon. My stomach growls, reminding me I haven't eaten in over a day. Then I notice something strange. Blood under my fingernails. The metallic taste of raw meat in my mouth. Did I eat something? I don't remember hunting. I don't remember eating. Hours pass, or maybe days. Time feels wrong here. I drift in and out of sleep, and sometimes when I wake, I'm in different parts of the cave with no memory of moving. Once, I wake to find myself standing outside in the snow, barefoot, staring up at the moon. My mouth feels strange, like my teeth don't fit right anymore. The next time I open my eyes, it's standing over me. The Wendigo. This close, I can smell its breath, like meat left too long in the sun. It speaks, and its voice is a horrible mix of my own and all the others I've heard. Daniel Kovacs, the man who ate while others starved, the survivor who left no one else to tell the story. I try to back away, but there's nowhere to go. My back hits ice. I can give you what you want, it says. To live, to forget, to never feel cold or hungry again. It reaches out, one long, twisted hand. Or I can find your daughter next. Hannah, in Seattle. She looks so much like you, I wonder. If she tastes the same. Something in me snaps. This thing knows about Hannah. It's threatening my daughter. The one good thing I have left. I notice we're standing on a thin section of ice. Below, I can hear running water from the hot spring. Not frozen, even in this cold. Shadow, I whisper. My loyal dog understands immediately. He's been waiting for my signal. Shadow lunges at the Wendigo, teeth baring for its leg. The creature turns, distracted for just a moment. That's all I need. I slam my full weight against it, and we crash through the thin ice together. The freezing water hits us like a hammer. The Wendigo thrashes, its red eyes wide, with something I never expected to see. Fear. It can't swim, or maybe the flowing. Water disrupts whatever power it has. Either way, it's panicking. I hold on to it tight as we sink deeper. My lungs burn. The cold is unbearable, but I don't let go. In the water, I hear Shadow howling above. He tried to follow us in, but couldn't get through the broken ice. Good. He might survive to warn others. As consciousness fades, I think of Hannah, of summers teaching her to fish, of phone calls never answered. I hope someday she'll understand why her father lived in the cold, why he couldn't face the warmth of home after what he'd done. The Wendigo's struggles grow weaker, or maybe those are my own movements I'm feeling. Everything goes dark. 3 days later, a search party finds my dogs still waiting by the broken ice. They discover Shadow's body at the edge of the water. He fought hard to reach me, tearing his paws on the ice. Deep in the spring, divers find something clutched in a frozen hand, my jade figurine. But the hand isn't mine. It's too large, with too many joints, the fingers unnaturally long. They never find my body. The weather station near where I disappeared records strange signals during storms. Always my voice, always the same message. Stay away from hunger's shadow. 49 years pass. An elderly woman visits Denali National Park. Hannah Kovacs, 78 years old now, stands at my memorial plaque near the ranger station. She never really knew her father, just the shadow of him that drifted in and out of her childhood. As she turns to leave, she notices something in the fresh snow. Boot prints. They match the old ranger boots in the display case dedicated to me. The prints lead away from the memorial, heading north, toward the mountains, toward hunger's shadow. She feels watched as she hurries back to her tour group. And somewhere in the swirling snow, something tall and thin follows her movements with hungry eyes, eyes that sometimes flash blue. unnaturally pale like chips of glacier ice, eyes just like her father's. My name is Elaine Reynolds. I've been a wildlife biologist and ranger at the Boundary Waters Canoe area in Minnesota for over 20 years now. Most folks come here for the peace and quiet, to get away from the noise of the city. They paddle through our crystal-clear lakes and sleep under the stars. And most of the time, that's all they find, the beauty of nature and nothing more. But I know better. It was late September 1997 when things started to change. I remember the night clearly because the northern lights were putting on a show like I'd never seen before. Green and purple lights dancing across the sky, reflecting in the still water of Sawbill Lake. It looked like someone had painted the world in neon colors. I stood at the edge of the water, watching those lights shimmer, and thinking about how lucky I was to live in such a beautiful place. Ancient white pines towered behind me, their needles whispering in the light breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out, its lonely cry echoing across the water. If you've never heard a loon call at night, it's something you won't forget. Haunting and beautiful all at once. I was out there because I'd been tracking unusual owl migration patterns. Something was off about their behavior that season. They were leaving early and in bigger groups than normal. As a wildlife biologist, these little changes caught my attention. Animals know things we don't sometimes. Just a few more shots. I whispered to myself as I checked my camera traps. I'd set them up along the edge of the forest to catch nocturnal animals. Mostly I expected to see owls, maybe the occasional wolf or moose. When I got back to my cabin and downloaded the images the next day, I nearly spilled my coffee all over my laptop. There, in 3 separate frames, was something wrong. A dark shape, much too big for any owl or eagle native to Minnesota. But it wasn't shaped right for a plane or helicopter either. The wings were wrong, too wide, too human-looking. Equipment malfunction, I told myself. Had to be. But deep down, I knew my cameras were working just fine. That same week, other strange things started happening. The northern lights began forming in patterns I'd never seen before in all my years studying them. Instead of wavering across the sky, they would form perfect curtains directly above certain spots in the forest. Spots that weren't marked on any official maps. My equipment started acting up too. Fresh batteries would drain completely within minutes when I took them near Island 27, a small rocky outcropping that the locals avoided, but tourists sometimes used for camping. After losing my 3rd flashlight in a week, I started marking these dead zones on my personal map. The wildlife was acting strange too. Nocturnal animals like raccoons and opossums were suddenly active in broad daylight. I found a family of beavers building a dam at noon, something they normally do under the cover of darkness. And they were agitated, working frantically as if racing against time. Their strange behavior was centered around certain rock formations, old granite outcroppings that formed natural arches. The animals wouldn't go near them at night, but circled them obsessively during the day. That weekend, a summer storm appeared out of nowhere. The weather report had called for clear skies, but black clouds rolled in from the west, and the wind picked up so fast that 3 different canoeing groups had to be rescued from the suddenly churning waters. The storm lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, then disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a perfectly clear sky. After helping with the last rescue, I ran into Joe Running Bear, one of the local Ojibwe elders who sometimes helped out as a guide for tourists. "Your people have been coming to these woods for generations," I said to Joe as we secured the rescue boats. "Have you ever seen the sky act like that?" Joe looked at me for a long moment before answering. "My grandmother used to talk about the light beings that appear before disasters. They would show themselves near what our people called the Lake of Tears. He pointed toward the area where I'd been having equipment problems. That place. The light beings are watchers, not helpers. They come before bad things happen. I laughed it off. But the next day, while hiking near one of the dead zones, my compass went crazy, the needle spinning in full circles. My watch started running backward, not just the hands moving counterclockwise. The actual seconds were counting down. I stood there, watching the seconds tick backward on my digital watch, and for the first time in my very rational, science-based life, I felt truly afraid of the woods I thought I knew. Something was watching us from the pines, and I was beginning to think it wasn't from around here at all. I guess I should tell you a bit about myself and why I'm here in the first place. Most rangers come and go after a few years, but I've stayed for 20. These lakes and forests aren't just my workplace. They're my home, and they hold my deepest pain. Before I studied animal behavior patterns, I worked with emergency management teams. My job was to watch how animals acted before natural disasters. Animals know when something bad is coming. They can sense earthquakes and storms long before our equipment picks them up. I was good at my job, really good, until the Blackwater mine incident. I tried to warn them. The rats were fleeing the mine, shaft in broad daylight, and the normally friendly stray cats wouldn't go near the entrance. Classic warning signs. But the foreman didn't believe me, called me a superstitious woman playing scientist. 3 days later, the shaft collapsed. 7 men died. The official report said I relied on unproven methods. My reputation was ruined, so I came back here to the place that already held my heart and my sorrow. You see, I grew up near these woods. My twin sister Claire and I used to camp here with our parents every summer. We were 12 when it happened. Claire and I were collecting pine cones by the shore, while Mom and Dad set up the tent. I remember Claire running ahead, just around a bend in the shoreline. I heard her call out, "Ellie, come look," and then nothing. We searched for 3 weeks. They brought dogs, helicopters, boats. The whole state was looking for my sister. They never found a single trace. Not her red backpack, not her favorite blue sneakers, not even a footprint. It was like the forest had swallowed her whole. That's why I became a ranger. That's why I stayed here, watching these woods, studying every animal, plant, and weather pattern. Somewhere, somehow, these forests hold the answer to what happened to Claire. Most people don't notice the little thing that makes me different right away. But if you look closely, you'll see I have 2 different colored eyes. My right eye is blue, like the sky over Sawbill Lake on a clear morning. My left is amber, almost gold in certain light. Claire had the same. Identical twins with mirror eyes, Dad used to say. The white streak in my hair came later, after Claire disappeared. Mum said it was from shock, that sometimes terrible things can change your body overnight. By the time I turned 20, the whole front section of my hair had gone white. I never dyed it. It felt like a badge, proof that losing Claire had marked me forever. Last month, the ranger station assigned me a new assistant, Kevin Lewis, fresh out of college with a degree in environmental science. Smart kid, eager to learn, but something about him feels off. He asks too many questions about my research methods, about the anomalies I've noted in my reports over the years. Sometimes I catch him going through my files when he thinks I'm out on patrol. "You really believe animals can predict disasters?" he asked me yesterday, that hint of a smirk on his face. "I don't believe it. I know it," I told him. "I've seen it too many times." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't really believe me. Few people do. The only one who never questions me is Merlin, my barred owl. I found him 3 years ago with a broken wing. After he healed, he refused to leave. Wildlife rehabbers say that happens sometimes. Animals imprint on their caretakers. So now he lives in an aviary attached to my cabin, free to come and go as he pleases. Merlin is my early warning system. He knows these woods as well as I do, and he's not afraid of anything. except for Island 27 and the areas where my equipment keeps failing. When we get near those places, he becomes agitated, flapping his wings and making distress calls until I turn back. I keep Claire's friendship bracelet with me always. She made it the summer before she vanished. Braided threads of blue, green and purple, like the northern lights. Sometimes, when I'm near those strange places in the forest, I swear it gets warmer on my wrist. Once, it vibrated like a phone, getting a text message. I know how that sounds, but I'm just telling you what happened. 20 years studying these waters has taught me what's normal and what's not. I know how the loons sound in mating season versus when they're alarmed. I can tell you exactly when the first ice will form on each lake and which islands the moose prefer for calving. I've mapped every portage trail, every hidden cove. That's why these changes scare me so much, because they're impossible. My brain works like a camera. I remember everything I see. It's called eidetic memory. Most people think it's a gift, but sometimes it's a curse. Because when I see something that doesn't fit into my mental map, my first instinct is to reject it, to convince myself I didn't really see what I saw. For the past month, I've been having the same dream. I'm in my bed at the cabin, and I wake up feeling watched. When I look to the window, there are two red eyes staring in at me. Not animal eyes. They're too tall for that, at least 7 feet off the ground. Just floating red dots in the darkness. I always wake up gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard it hurts. Last night I woke from that dream and got up to get a glass of water. As I passed the window, I saw 2 pinpricks of red light reflecting in the glass. When I turned to look outside, they were gone. Just the wind in the pines and the moon on the lake. But I keep detailed journals of everything I observe out here. Weather patterns, animal migrations, plant growth cycles. And now, a new journal. One where I document the impossible things, the battery failures, the compass malfunctions, the northern lights forming perfect curtains over unmapped islands, the red eyes watching from the forest, because somewhere in all of this, there has to be a pattern. And patterns are what I do best. I just never expected to find a pattern like this, or that it would lead me straight back to the summer Claire disappeared. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the first tree circle. I was mapping a new hiking trail about 2 miles from my cabin when I stepped into a clearing I'd never seen before. The hair on my arms stood straight up. 7 pine trees stood in a perfect circle, like someone had used a giant compass to place them. That alone was strange, but what really got me was the bark, or rather the lack of it. Each tree had been stripped bare of bark in a perfect ring, exactly 7 feet up from the ground. The exposed wood underneath was smooth, like it had been polished. "Kevin," I called to my assistant, who was checking trail markers nearby. "Come look at this." He joined me in the clearing, his face going pale when he saw the trees. "Is this some kind of joke? Did someone do this?" I shook my head. It would take hours to strip bark this cleanly, and we'd have noticed someone working out here. I reached out to touch one of the exposed rings and quickly pulled my hand back. The wood was ice cold, even though it was over 70 degrees that day. "We should take samples," Kevin said, already reaching for his pack. I nodded and pulled out my phone to take pictures. The battery was at 98%, but as soon as I aimed the camera at the trees, it died. Just like that, from nearly full to completely dead in seconds. The next day, I brought my digital recorder to the tree circle. I wanted to see if there were any unusual sounds. Sometimes infrasound or ultrasound can explain animal behavior, changes. What I recorded made no scientific sense. When I played it back at my cabin, a high-pitched whine came through my speakers, getting louder and higher until my nose started bleeding. Kevin, who was sitting across the room, had the same reaction. We both lunged for the off button at the same time. "What the hell was that?" Kevin asked, holding a tissue to his nose. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but whatever it is, it's spreading." 3 days later, a group of college students came running into the ranger station in a panic. They'd found their campsite on Island 19 completely destroyed. Tents shredded, equipment scattered. At first, I thought it was a bear attack. But bears don't arrange personal items in geometric patterns. The students' watches, phones, and flashlights had been placed in a perfect spiral on a flat rock in the center of the camp. Most disturbing of all, there was no sign of a struggle. No blood, no tracks in the mud, nothing broken that would suggest someone had fought back against an animal. Just precise destruction, like someone had used scissors to carefully cut everything apart. When I went to investigate, I noticed a smell in the air, sharp and metallic, like the air after a lightning strike. The smell of ozone and something else, like burnt electronics. But there were no burned devices, and the island had no electricity. In the ashes of their campfire, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small journal, its cover singed, but the pages inside intact. It was dated 1952, and it contained detailed drawings of something the writer called the Watcher. The sketches showed a tall, winged figure with no face, just like what my camera traps had captured. The journal belonged to a Dr. Marcus Finch, an ornithologist who'd come to study the loon population. His final entry read, "It doesn't want us to leave. The radio only plays crying now. The others don't believe me, but I've seen its eyes watching us from across the lake. God help us all." That same day, the satellite phones at the ranger station started malfunctioning. No matter what number we dialed, we heard the same thing. The sound of someone crying, soft at first, then building to heart-wrenching sobs. After each call, the phones would be dead for exactly 27 minutes before working. Again, the park supervisor thought it was just a technical glitch with the satellite, but I knew better, especially when it happened to my personal cell phone too, miles from the station. Electronic devices began to develop a static build-up before failing completely. You could hear it coming, a soft crackling that grew louder and louder until the device sparked and died. We started warning visitors to keep their phones in signal-blocking bags, telling them it was due to unusual electromagnetic activity. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. Then the birds started falling. It happened first near the tree circle. I was taking measurements when dozens of sparrows and warblers simply dropped from the sky, dead before they hit the ground. When I examined them later, I found their eardrums had burst, and some had internal damage so severe it looked like their organs had liquefied. The most unsettling thing of all were the photographs. I'd set up new camera traps around the tree circle and the islands where equipment failed. When I developed the pictures, I saw shadows where nothing had been when I took the photos. Dark humanoid shapes with what looked like wings. With each new batch of photos, the shapes became clearer, more solid. Kevin thought I was losing my mind when I showed him. "It's just a shadow from a branch or a processing error," he insisted. But then we both saw the photos from Island 27. A tall, dark figure standing at the water's edge, its reflection perfect in the still lake, too tall to be human, too still to be alive. The timestamp showed it had stood there, unmoving, for over 3 hours. Last week, things got even stranger. The portage trails, paths where canoeists carry their boats between lakes, started shifting. Trails I'd walked 1,000 times suddenly took me to different places. 3 separate hiking groups reported the same thing. No matter which trail they took, they all ended up at Island 27. I've been a ranger for 20 years. I know every inch of these woods. But now it's like the forest itself is changing, rearranging, around us. All paths lead to the Watcher, and I'm starting to think that's exactly what it wants. I saw it for the first time on a Thursday evening. I was checking water samples near Island 27, the sun just starting to dip behind the tall pines. The lake was perfectly still, like glass. That's when I felt it, the feeling of being watched, not like an animal watching you, curious or hungry. This was different, like being studied. I turned slowly and looked up. There it was, perched at the very top of a white pine. A tall figure, at least 7 feet high, with massive wings spread out behind it. The wings must have been 15 feet across, wider than any bird I'd ever seen. But they weren't feathered wings. They reminded me more of a dragonfly or moth's wings, thin and almost see-through in places, with strange patterns visible when they moved. The strangest thing was how it didn't reflect any light, even though the setting sun was hitting it directly. It was like looking at a hole cut into the world, a perfect shadow with glowing red eyes. Not eyes like we have, with whites and pupils. Just 2 points of red light where eyes should be. It didn't move, not even a little. For almost 20 minutes it just watched me. I stood frozen, afraid that any movement might trigger it to attack. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then, as the last bit of sun disappeared, it was gone. Not like it flew away, more like it folded itself out of existence. 1 second there, the next gone, with barely a rustle of pine needles. I ran all the way back to my cabin and locked the door, something I'd never done in 20 years of living in these woods. The next day I went back with my camera. I had to know if what I'd seen was real or if my mind was playing tricks on me. This time I saw it hovering just above the tree line on the far side of the lake. It stayed perfectly still, like a statue hanging in the air. I took a dozen photos, but when I checked them later, all I got was a blur of motion between frames, as if it had moved impossibly fast the exact moment I pressed the shutter. In one frame, it was by the tree line. In the next, it was directly overhead, 200 yards closer in less than a second. Kevin found me in the lab, staring at the blurry photos. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, peering over my shoulder. I showed him the photos. Not a ghost, something worse. Over the next week, I saw it 3 more times. Each time it was watching something technological. My satellite phone, the solar panels on the ranger station roof, the radio tower on the far ridge. It would hover perfectly still for hours, studying, learning. After it visited the radio tower, our communications started changing. Instead of just static or crying sounds, we began getting snippets of our own conversations played back to us. Things we'd said days earlier near the radios. Like it was learning how we talked to each other. I tried to report what was happening to my supervisor, but he thought I was overworked and imagining things. So I kept my observations to myself and in my journals. The worst part was that I couldn't protect myself from it. One afternoon, a hiker came in panicking, saying he'd seen a flying man near his camp. He'd fired a warning shot from his hunting rifle, but the gun had gotten so hot, he'd dropped it and burned his hand. I went to investigate with my own rifle, even though I rarely carried it. When I got within 50 yards of where the hiker had seen the entity, the metal barrel became scorching hot. I had to drop it or risk serious burns. Whatever this thing was, it could somehow heat metal from a distance. The entity began to move differently too. I caught it on film once, and when I played back the footage frame by frame, something impossible happened. One frame showed it standing by the shore. The very next frame, taken just a fraction of a second later, showed it directly above my camera. It had moved faster than the camera could capture. Then came the sounds. Low, mechanical clicking followed by a deep vibration that you felt more than heard. The vibration would start in your chest and spread outward until your whole body hummed with it. After my first encounter with that sound, I had heart palpitations for hours. 2 hikers who heard it needed medical evacuation. One had developed an irregular heartbeat. The other passed out and couldn't be woken for almost an hour. Most terrifying of all was how it seemed to control where people went. 3 separate search parties looking for missing hikers all reported the same thing. Their compasses and GPS units would suddenly align to a new north, leading them directly to Island 27. And at the same time, hikers on the other side of the park would see the entity. meaning it was somehow in multiple places at once. The impact on the environment was becoming visible too. Wherever it landed, plants would wither in a perfect circle. The water nearby turned metallic tasting and made anyone who drank it violently ill. Dead fish would wash up on shores near where it had been spotted, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on my cabin porch watching the darkness. The entity appeared at the edge of the trees, its red eyes seeming to look right through me. Then something new happened. Images began flashing in my mind. A dam breaking, water rushing through valleys, cabins and campsites washed away, people drowning. The images were so vivid I could hear the roaring water, feel the spray on my face. When they stopped, I was on my knees on the porch, gasping for air. I realized then that the Watcher hadn't come to hurt us. It had come to warn us. The next morning, I spread all my maps across the kitchen table. Something had been bothering me about the pattern of sightings, and now I knew what it was. I grabbed a red marker and put X's at every spot where the entity had been seen. Then I marked all the places where equipment had failed and where the strange tree circles had appeared. When I connected the dots, they formed a perfect outline of the watershed above the Northridge Dam, about 20 miles upstream from the boundary. That dam had been built in the 1940s to control flooding. It was old, but according to public records, it had passed its safety inspection just last year. Still, the images the entity had pushed into my mind were clear. That dam was going to fail, and soon. I called the dam authority right away, but the man who answered laughed when I tried to explain. "Ma'am, that dam is solid as a rock," he said. "We just had inspectors out there 3 months ago." "Please, just send someone to check it again," I begged. "I think there might be structural damage that wasn't visible before." He promised someone would take a look, but I could tell from his voice he was just humoring the crazy lady ranger. While I waited to hear back, I kept studying my maps. Something else was there, something I was missing. The locations of the sightings weren't random. They formed a mathematical pattern, like the entity was using the islands as some kind of triangulation points. But for what? That afternoon, Kevin found me surrounded by calculations. "What are you working on?" he asked, his voice unusually tense. "I think the Mothman, the entity, is trying to warn us about the Northridge Dam," I said, not looking up. "And I think it's using these islands as reference points to show us exactly where the break will happen." Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "You need to stop this, Elaine," he finally said. Something in his voice made me look up. He was holding a small recording device and a camera with a telephoto lens I'd never seen before. "What's going on, Kevin?" I asked, slowly standing up. "I'm a journalist," he admitted. "I've been working on a story about weird sightings in national parks. My editor didn't believe your reports about wildlife behavior predicting disasters, but I thought there might be something to it." He looked genuinely sorry. "I never expected to find whatever this is. I should have been angry, but I didn't have time for that." "Then help me," I said. "Use your connections to get someone to check that dam, now." He nodded and stepped outside to make some calls. While he was gone, my satellite phone rang. The dam authority was calling back. "Ranger Reynolds, we sent a team out like you asked. There's a hairline crack in the main concrete face of the dam. It wasn't there during the last inspection. We're evacuating downstream communities as a precaution, but honestly, it doesn't look serious enough to cause a failure." I thanked him and hung up, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. That night, the dreams were worse than ever. I saw the dam breaking, the water rushing down toward us. I saw cabins smashed to splinters, canoes tossed around like toys. And through it all, those red eyes watching. I woke at dawn, my sheets soaked with sweat. Outside, the sky was an eerie reddish-orange, though the sun hadn't risen yet. I stumbled to the porch and froze. The entity was there, hovering at the edge of my yard. But this time, it wasn't alone. Beside it, a smaller figure floated a few feet off the ground. A girl, maybe 12 years old, with a red backpack and blue sneakers. Her form was transparent, like looking at a reflection in water, but I would know her anywhere. Claire. My sister's ghost, or whatever it was, raised her hand and pointed toward Island 27. Then both figures vanished. I was already dressed and grabbing my emergency pack when Kevin banged on my door. "Elaine! The dam!" They've upgraded the warning. They've found major structural issues and ordered a full evacuation of the watershed. He looked panicked. But there are at least 30 camping groups out in the park who won't get the message in time. I know. Where they'll be, I said, grabbing my keys. The entity has been herding everyone toward Island 27 for weeks. That's the highest point in the park. If the water comes, that's the safest place. Kevin looked confused. But why would it do that? Why not just let people evacuate? I don't think it can affect things outside the park, I said. Its influence has limits. It's been trying to warn us the only way it knows how. We took my boat to the ranger station, where emergency crews were already gathering. I showed them my map with Island 27 marked as our rally point. We split into teams, each taking different sections of the park to warn campers and hikers. As Kevin and I headed toward the farthest islands, the sky grew darker. Not like storm clouds, more like the light itself was being drained away. The air felt heavy and charged, like just before a lightning strike. Kevin insisted on going to check campsites on the small islands while I headed to the main peninsula. "I'll get better pictures this way," he said with a grim smile, patting his camera. "If something happens to me, make sure my editor gets these." He handed me a memory card, which I tucked into my pocket. I'd reached the third campsite on my list when I felt it, a low vibration in the ground. Then came a sound like distant thunder that didn't fade away. The dam had broken. I barely had. Time to get the family of 4 I'd found into my boat before the water level started rising visibly. We sped toward Island 27, passing other ranger boats also loaded with evacuees. The water was churning now, carrying debris from upstream, broken trees, parts of cabins, even a canoe crumpled like it was made of paper. By the time we reached Island 27, the water had risen nearly 6 feet. The small island was crowded with evacuees and rangers. I did a quick count. We'd saved most of them, but at least a dozen people were still unaccounted for. Kevin among them. As night fell, the entity appeared once more. It hovered above the island, wings spread wide, its red eyes seeming to count us all. For a moment I thought I saw Claire again, standing beside it. Then a bright flash lit up the sky. Heat lightning, according to the weather service later, and when my vision cleared, the entity was gone. The floodwaters receded after 3 days. The damage was extensive, but thanks to the evacuation, only 2 lives were lost. They found Kevin's body washed up on a rocky shore 10 miles downstream. His camera was still strapped around his neck, somehow undamaged. When I looked through his photos later, my blood ran cold. In the last image, taken on Island 37 just before the flood hit, a tall winged figure stood behind Kevin, its reflection clear in the lake water. But in the reflection, it wasn't a featureless shadow man. It had Claire's face. That was 5 years ago. The official report blamed the dam failure on overlooked structural damage from the unusually harsh winter. No mention was made of the entity or the strange events leading up to the flood. Kevin's newspaper ran a small piece about unusual animal behavior before the dam broke, but nothing more. I stayed on as a ranger. What else could I do? These woods are my home, and now I understand my purpose here. Something about this place, about me, drew the entity here. Maybe because of Claire, maybe because of my connection to the land. I don't know, but there have been changes. Since that night, I get splitting headaches before disasters anywhere in the region. 3 days before a factory fire in Duluth, the pain was so bad I couldn't see straight. The day before a school bus crashed on an icy road near Thunder Bay, I felt like my skull was being crushed. And every 5 years, like clockwork, all electronic equipment in the boundary waters fails for exactly 27 hours. The park service blames it on solar flares now, but I know better. It's coming back, checking on us, making sure we remember. My niece Emma, Claire would have been her mother, comes to visit me at the ranger station sometimes. Smart kid, reminds me of Claire with her endless questions and fearless curiosity. Last time she was here, she noticed something odd about my binoculars. "Aunt Ellie, why is one lens red?" she asked, turning them over in her small hands. I smiled and took the binoculars back. "So I can see what's really watching us," I told her. She didn't understand then, but someday she might. Because the truth is, the entity never really left. On quiet nights when the northern lights dance above the pines, I sometimes catch glimpses of it. A tall shadow moving between trees, red eyes watching from across the lake. I don't run anymore. I don't hide. I just wave and say, "Still here. Old friend, still watching out for them just like you." Sometimes I swear I see it nod back. My name is Dr. James Rollins, though these days most folks just call me Ranger Jim. The morning mist was thick over the sawgrass marshes as I guided my airboat through the familiar channels of Everglades National Park. The sun was just starting to rise, turning the water into sheets of gold between the tall grass. All around me I could see dark shapes moving beneath the tea-colored water, alligators slipping silently below the surface as my boat approached. I cut the engine and let the airboat drift. The sudden silence was broken only by the calls of birds and the occasional splash of something dropping into the water. This is what I loved about mornings in the Everglades, that moment when the world seems to be waking up, stretching and yawning before the day really begins. I reached for my sample kit. 15 years ago, I was a marine biologist with a promising career ahead of me. Now I collect water samples in one of the most beautiful and mysterious places in America. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Base, this is Rollins, I said into my radio. I'm at checkpoint 5, beginning collection. My radio crackled. Copy that, Rollins. Remember to... The voice suddenly cut out, replaced by a strange, low growling sound before returning. Back before noon. Storm system moving in. Copy that, I replied, trying to ignore the weird sound. Probably just interference. That had been happening a lot lately. As I worked, filling sample bottles and marking them carefully, something caught my eye. About half a mile away was a small island, we call them hammocks out here, dense with trees and raised just enough above. The water to stay dry year-round. Usually these spots were teeming with wildlife, birds, small mammals, reptiles. They all gravitated to these little islands. But this one was completely empty. No birds in the trees, no movement in the underbrush, nothing. It was strange enough that I decided to check it out. The water was unusually low. We'd been having a drought for months now. Areas that were normally underwater stood exposed to the air, revealing old wooden structures and forgotten footpaths from times when water levels were different. I had to push my airboat through several narrow channels, the propeller occasionally scraping bottom. As I got closer to the hammock, I started to feel uneasy. The wildlife wasn't just avoiding the island, they were avoiding the whole area. The usual chorus of birds had gone quiet. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. And then I noticed the alligators. Normally, these creatures are fiercely territorial, keeping to their own areas and challenging anything that enters their space. But here, at least a dozen of them were clustered together in the shallow water, their bodies forming a rough circle. They were facing outward, like they were defending against something. I'd never seen behavior like this before. Not in 15 years of studying these swamps. My radio crackled again. I tried to call in what I was seeing, but every third or fourth word I spoke came out as something else. A deep, guttural sound that wasn't my voice at all. That's when I realized where I was. The old-timers called this area Red Territory, named after a Spanish expedition that vanished here in 1521. The locals had other names for it too. The Bad Water, Skunk Ape Hollow, the place where God don't look. I'd always dismissed those stories as superstition, but as I drifted closer to that empty hammock, a thick, rotten egg smell filled the air. My head started spinning, and for a second the trees seemed to bend and twist like they were alive. I blinked hard, and my vision cleared. Just a dizzy spell, I told myself. Probably the heat getting to me, but deep down I knew better. Something was wrong here. Something was very wrong, and I was heading straight toward it. I should have turned back right then. Any smart person would have. But I've been chasing answers in these swamps for too long to walk away from a mystery. 10 years ago, I was Dr. James Rollins, respected researcher at the University of Florida. I had grants, students, and a corner office. Then I started hearing stories about something living in the deepest parts of the Everglades. The locals called it the skunk ape, Florida's version of Bigfoot. Just tall tales to scare tourists, most people said. But I'd found footprints, hair samples, things I couldn't explain with normal science. I still remember standing in front of my colleagues, showing them my evidence. The silence in that room, the looks on their faces, pity mixed with embarrassment. Within a month, my funding was gone. My reputation too, so I traded my lab coat for a ranger uniform. At least out here I could keep looking. My fingers brushed against the scar on my leg as I steered the airboat closer to the hammock. I've had a limp since I was a kid. Polio. Doctors said I'd never walk, but they were wrong. The limp slowed me down, but it also taught me patience. In the Everglades, patience keeps you alive. Rollins, do you copy? Your location is breaking up on GPS. I grabbed my radio. I copy, base. I'm near the old cypress stand, heading toward Miller's hammock. You've got company out there. New Ranger Eric Tanner said he was meeting you for training. I frowned. Nobody told me about any training today. Roger that. I'll keep an eye out. As if on cue, I heard another airboat approaching. A young guy in a crisp new uniform waved as he pulled alongside me. Couldn't be more than 25. His boat was too clean, his uniform too pressed. City boy. Dr. Rollins, I'm Eric Tanner. They sent me to shadow you today. I nodded. Call me Jim. Nobody's called me doctor in a long time. I read your papers, the ones about the humanoid sightings. His voice was serious, but I caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Pretty wild stuff. I'd heard that tone before. The polite disbelief, the hidden joke. Just stick close, I said. This area can get tricky. A low growl came from the cage at the back of my boat. Artemis was awake. I rescued her as a cub after poachers killed her mother. Florida panthers are endangered and smart as hell. She was my early warning system. If something wasn't right, she knew it before I did. Right now, her ears were flat against her head, yellow eyes fixed on the hammock ahead. I pulled my grandfather's old Leica camera from my pack. Another weird thing about this job. Sometimes, when I develop the film, I find pictures I don't remember taking. Shadows where there shouldn't be any. Strange shapes in the mist. 7 years I've been mapping these backwaters, I told Tanner. There are places out here that don't show up on any official map, places where the compass needle spins. With all due respect, sir, that's impossible. Tanner smiled, all confidence. I majored in environmental science. The Everglades is a complex ecosystem, but it follows the same natural laws as anywhere else. I didn't argue. Some things you have to see to believe. Last night I had a dream, I said, keeping my voice casual as I checked my gear. I was moving through the swamp on all fours. My vision was different. I could see heat. Smell things a human shouldn't be able to smell. Stress dreams, Tanner suggested. Happens to me before big exams. I didn't tell him I'd been having the same dream for weeks now, or that each time I woke up with mud on my hands and feet, though. My doors were locked from the inside. Artemis growled again, louder this time. We should check out that hammock, I said, pointing to the empty island. Something's driving the wildlife away. Probably just a big gator claimed it as territory, Tanner said, or runoff from agricultural chemicals. I nodded, but I knew better. The signs were all there. I'd seen them before. The silence, the strange behavior of the animals, the smell. Something was out there watching us. I could feel it. And deep down, beneath my scientific training and logical mind, I knew we were heading straight into its trap. But I had to know. I had to see it for myself. After all these years of searching, of being laughed at and dismissed, I needed proof, even if it killed me. We reached the hammock about 20 minutes later. The low water made it slow going, and twice we had to get out and push our airboats through the mud. By the time we stepped onto solid ground, the sun was high overhead, but the air felt cool under the thick canopy of trees. What's that? Tanner pointed to a small wooden structure half hidden among the cypress trees. I recognized it immediately. Old research station. University set it up in the 90s to study water quality. Been abandoned for years, but something was wrong. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. As we got closer, I could see deep scratches in the wood. Not from an animal. Too precise, too deliberate. Stay behind me, I told Tanner, pulling out my flashlight. Artemis refused to leave the boat, pacing and growling. Inside, it was chaos. Equipment smashed, tables overturned, and on the walls. I ran my fingers over strange marks. Matted reddish-brown. Hair stuck to the plaster. Vandals? Tanner suggested, but his voice had lost its confidence. I shook my head. Look at the dust. Nobody's been here in months. This just happened. That's when I noticed the silence. Complete, total silence. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the trees. In the Everglades, silence is not natural. Silence means danger. Then we heard it, a rhythmic knocking sound like someone tapping wood against wood. First from the north, then from the east, then west. What is that? Tanner whispered. I don't know, I lied. I'd heard it before, in my dreams. We hurried back to our boats. Mine was covered in massive handprints pressed into the metal sides, handprints too large for any human. The fuel lines had been cut, not torn or bitten, but precisely severed. This isn't happening, Tanner muttered, checking his own boat. This isn't real. The smell hit us then. That rotten egg odor, but stronger now, mixed with something musky and animal. My head started spinning again, and for a second I thought I saw my old research partner, David, standing among the trees. But David had disappeared 5 years ago during our last expedition together. We need to go, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Your boat still work? Tanner nodded, already climbing aboard. What about yours? Leave it. I'll radio for pickup once we're clear. As I reached for my pack, my hand brushed against something cool and metallic, hidden under a fallen log. An old Kodak camera, the kind they made in the 50s. The film counter showed 36, a full roll, waiting to be developed. I pocketed it without thinking and grabbed my compass. The needle spun wildly before settling, pointing directly toward the knocking sounds that were growing louder. We pushed off, Tanner gunning the engine as Artemis huddled against my legs. The Panther was shaking. I'd never seen her afraid before. I turned on my recording equipment out of habit. The playback made my blood run cold. Beneath our voices was a deep subsonic rumbling that made my chest tighten and my heart race. Look! Tanner pointed to the bank where 3 large alligators lay dead, flipped onto their backs. As we drifted closer, I could see their bellies had been opened and emptied, not torn or ripped, but cut with surgical precision. Mist began rising from the water, thick and unnatural. And in that mist, just at the corner of my vision, I could see faces, twisted, watching faces that vanished when I turned to look directly at them. "We're going the wrong way," I said suddenly, checking my map. "That's Miller's cypress stand, but it should be east of us, not north." "You sure?" Tanner slowed the boat. "I've been mapping these waters for 7 years. I know where everything is." But the landscape had changed, familiar landmarks appearing in impossible places. It was as if the swamp itself was rearranging around us. The knocking sounds stopped. The silence that followed was worse. "Jim!" Tanner's voice was barely a whisper as he pointed ahead. "What is that?" Through the mist, about 50 yards away, something stood in the shallow water. It was tall, 7 feet at least, and covered in matted, reddish-brown hair. It stood perfectly still, watching us. The only movement was steam rising from its massive shoulders in the cool air. I raised my grandfather's camera with shaking hands and took a picture. When I lowered it, the figure was gone. "Did you see that?" I asked. Tanner's face had gone white. "No," he lied. "I didn't see anything." But I knew he had, and I knew what it meant. After 15 years of searching, of being laughed at and dismissed, I'd finally found my proof. The skunk ape was real, and it was hunting us. "We need to get back to base," Tanner said, his voice shaking as he pushed the airboat to full speed. "Now!" I agreed, but something inside me wanted to stay. After years of searching, I'd finally seen it. The proof was right in front of us. We'd gone maybe half a mile when the mist thickened again. This time, the massive figure didn't hide. It stood in the middle of the channel, water at its knees, completely blocking our path. Tanner cut the engine, and we drifted to a stop. Now I could see it clearly. Over 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and unusually long arms that ended in hands with 6 fingers each. Its body was covered in matted reddish-brown hair, and its eyes caught the sunlight with an unnatural red glow. It wasn't just big. It was built like it could tear a tree in half. "Don't move," I whispered. "Don't make any sudden sounds." The creature didn't move either. It just stood there, watching us, studying us. Minutes passed like hours. "Why isn't it attacking?" Tanner whispered. "I don't think it wants to hurt us," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "It's curious." Suddenly, the creature made a huffing sound and released a cloud of spray from glands near its neck, the source of the sulfur smell. The cloud drifted toward us. "Cover your mouth," I shouted, pulling my shirt over my nose. But it was too late. The mist washed over us, and the world began to twist. I saw David again, my old research partner, but this time he was screaming for help, sinking into black water while something pulled him down. Next to me, Tanner was staring wide-eyed at nothing, mumbling about fire and smoke. When my head cleared, the creature was gone. But I knew it wasn't far. "We need to keep moving," I said, trying to get Tanner's attention. He was still lost in whatever nightmare the spray had shown him. I took the controls and started the engine. As we moved forward, I noticed broken branches along the bank, arranged in patterns, like arrows pointing away from where we were heading. "It's herding us," I realized with a chill. "It wants us to go this way." We followed a narrow channel for about 10 minutes, the walls of sawgrass and cypress growing tighter around us. Then we hit a dead end, a wall of tangled roots and fallen trees that hadn't been there before. When we turned around, another skunk ape stood blocking the way we'd come. Tanner grabbed his gun. "We have to fight our way out." "No!" I grabbed his arm. "We don't know how many there are." But he fired anyway. The shot echoed across the water, and the creature dropped out of sight. For a moment, I thought Tanner had killed it. Then we heard movement all around us, splashing through the shallow water, rustling through the sawgrass. Not just one creature, many. They were using tactics, flanking us, cutting off escape. Routes, this wasn't animal behavior, this was strategy. The first creature reappeared, unharmed. It reached toward our boat, and I thought it was going to attack. Instead, it carefully took my camera, turning it over in its hands with obvious curiosity. "It's interested in our technology," I whispered. The creature sniffed the camera, then made a low rumbling sound that vibrated in my chest. Instantly, I felt dizzy and sick to my stomach. Tanner doubled over, groaning. "They're using sound as a weapon," I said, fighting to stay conscious. The frequency was perfectly tuned to disrupt human balance and thinking. Above us, a flock of birds suddenly rose from the trees and began circling. I noticed alligators slipping into the water around our boat, positioning themselves like troops. "Following orders. They control the animals somehow," Tanner said in disbelief. The skunk ape placed my camera back in the boat, then retreated a few steps. With deliberate movements, it began breaking branches, creating another pattern on the ground. "A boundary line?" "It's telling us not to cross that line," I said. "It's marking territory." Tanner was sweating heavily now, his eyes darting around. "This isn't happening," he kept saying. "This isn't real." But it was real. Too real. I noticed something else about the creatures now. They were protecting something. Each time we drifted toward one section of the swamp, they became more aggressive, herding us away. "They don't want us going south," I said. "Whatever they're guarding is in that direction." As if to confirm my theory, the lead skunk ape picked up a massive log and hurled it into the water, blocking our path southward. The message couldn't have been clearer. "Turn back." I was about to suggest we retreat when my radio crackled to life. "Rollins? Tanner? We've lost your signal. Do you copy?" I grabbed the radio, but before I could respond, the lead skunk ape made that infrasound rumble again. And this time, the radio exploded in my hand, sending plastic shards flying. Tanner went pale. "They understand what our technology does." The sun was getting low now. Soon it would be dark, and I knew we didn't want to be here after sunset. "We need to get out of here," I said. "We'll come back with more people, more equipment." But as I turned the boat, I noticed Tanner staring at me strangely, his pupils so dilated, his eyes looked black. "Tanner, you okay?" He smiled, but it wasn't his face anymore. Something else was looking at me through his eyes. "I've been here before," he said, his voice oddly calm. "They've been waiting for you to come back, Dr. Rollins. They remember you." The toxin, I realized. It was affecting his mind. "Tanner, snap out of it." I grabbed his shoulder and shook him hard. His eyes slowly focused again, and he blinked rapidly. "What? What happened?" he asked, confused. "The toxin is affecting your thinking. We need to get you to a doctor." I took control of the airboat and turned us around. The skunk apes watched but didn't try to stop us as we retreated the way we had come. But I knew they were following, moving. Silently through the trees alongside us, my head was pounding and my vision kept blurring. Whatever was in that spray was getting worse. I could feel it working through my system, making my heart race, my thoughts jumble. I kept seeing things that weren't there. Shadows moving in impossible ways, the water turning red, then clear again. "We're going the wrong way," Tanner suddenly said. His voice sounded different, deeper, rougher. "We're heading back to base," I told him firmly. "No." He pointed south. "We need to go there. To the ruins." "What ruins?" I asked. But a flash of memory hit me. Stone structures, ancient and weathered, rising from the water in my dreams. "They're protecting something," Tanner said, his eyes distant. "Something old, something that was here before people." The toxin was making him hallucinate. It had to be. But how did he know about my dreams? I noticed something else, too. The drought had exposed channels I'd never seen before. Narrow waterways leading south, deeper into red territory. "There's an old story," I said, thinking out loud. "Smugglers used to hide in these swamps, built tunnels under the cypress knees. Maybe we can use them to get away." I spotted an opening in the bank, a dark tunnel barely visible behind hanging moss. I steered toward it, hoping the low-hanging roof would hide us. The tunnel was just wide enough for our boat. The air inside was cool and damp. smelling of earth and old wood. We cut the engine and used a paddle to move silently through. The darkness. My grandfather told me about this place, I whispered. Moonshiners used it during Prohibition. It leads all the way to an old sinkhole. Tanner didn't respond. He was staring at his hands, flexing them like he'd never seen them before. My fever was getting worse. I could feel sweat soaking through my clothes, and my heart was beating too fast. The toxin was doing something to my body, changing it somehow. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a large cavern. Ahead, moonlight filtered down through a hole in the ceiling. We had reached the sinkhole. I paddled us forward, and what I saw took my breath away. The drought had drained most of the water from the sinkhole, revealing what looked like ancient stone steps leading down to a structure made of massive blocks. It looked like a temple or a tomb, covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. "That's not possible," I whispered. There were no stone buildings in the Everglades, no ancient civilizations here. "Not human ones," Tanner said, and his voice had that strange quality again. I turned to look at him just as he lunged at me, knocking me out of the boat. We both fell into the shallow water. His eyes were completely black now, and when he opened his mouth to scream, his teeth looked wrong, too sharp, too many. "They're changing us!" I shouted, trying to get away from him. "The toxin is altering our DNA!" Tanner didn't seem to hear me. He was moving strangely now, sometimes on all fours, lunging and circling like a predator. I scrambled up the stone steps, hoping to find higher ground. My leg was throbbing, my old polio limp worse than ever. At the top of the steps, I froze. 5 skunk apes stood in a half-circle watching me. Behind them, I could see more of the stone structures, an entire city hidden beneath the water and mud for centuries, maybe millennia. They weren't just animals, they were guardians. The largest of them stepped forward. In its hand was my grandfather's camera. Suddenly, I understood. They weren't trying to hurt us. They were protecting this place from being discovered, from being exploited. "I won't tell anyone," I said, holding up my hands. "I'll help you keep this place secret." The creature tilted its head, as if considering my words. Below, Tanner howled, a sound no human throat should make. He was changing faster than me, already half transformed into something that wasn't human anymore. The lead skunk ape made a gesture, and 2 others moved toward Tanner. He fought wildly, but they easily subdued him, carrying him toward the stone structures. "What are you going to do with him?" I asked, but I already knew. Tanner was gone. The toxin had taken his mind. Now his body would follow. The leader handed me back my camera, and I realized what it meant. I could document this place, these creatures, but only to protect them, to keep others away. "I understand," I said. "Red territory stays off the maps." The creature made a low, rumbling sound, not the disorienting infrasound from before, but something that felt almost like approval. I took one last picture of the ancient city, then turned and limped back toward the tunnel. 3 months later, I sat in a hospital room while doctors puzzled over my blood work. The fever had broken after a week, but tests showed something strange in my system. Genetic material they couldn't identify, slowly altering my DNA in ways they couldn't explain. I told them I'd gotten lost in the Everglades, found my way out. After 2 days, I never mentioned Tanner, the ruins, or the skunk apes. According to park records, Ranger Eric Tanner had never even existed. The photos from my grandfather's camera showed nothing but empty water and trees. The photos from the old Kodak I'd found were different. They showed a research team from the 1950s encountering the same creatures, making the same discovery I had. They'd kept the secret too. A year later, a development company tried to drain part of the Everglades for a new resort. Their survey teams kept getting lost. Equipment failed. Eventually, they gave up and moved the project elsewhere. I went back to my ranger duties, mapping the Everglades. with one section conspicuously blank on all my charts. The locals still called it red territory, and I made sure the stories about it stayed scary enough to keep people away. Sometimes on patrol, I'd find strange footprints at the edge of my camp, six-toed tracks that disappeared into the water. I'd leave out my research notes, and in the morning they'd be gone, read and returned. 5 years after my encounter, a trail camera caught something remarkable. 2 skunk apes patrolling the boundary of red territory. One moved with the typical smooth gait of the creatures. The other had a distinctive limp,